Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the soot-laced air of Edwardian Britain, where your breath fogs in front of your face indoors and frost curls around your window panes like delicate lace. The winters are long, brutal and unrelenting, and if you're not careful they just might kill you. But the Edwardians? They survive, somehow. Maybe not all of them. Actually, statistically speaking, you probably won't survive this either. But that's half the fun, isn't it? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from too. Drop your city and current time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crack open the door to a dimly lit Edwardian street, and the cold hits you like a slap with an ice-covered glove. It's 1906, smog hangs low in the air, stirred only by the cough of a passing horse-drawn cab. The soot-blackened snow at the edge of the road crunches underfoot, a mix of ash, dirt and half-frozen mystery sludge. The houses are narrow, stoic little brick boxes, some with a candle flickering faintly behind thin curtains. You pull your scarf tighter, not that it does much good. The wool itches. Everything itches in this era. Let's face it, winter here isn't some romantic postcard scene. The Victorian era may have romanticised snowflakes and sleigh bells, but Edwardian winters are functional and fierce. They aren't trying to charm you, they're trying to outlast you. And yet the city thrums with life. Chimneys cough grey plumes into the sky, and you can smell the coal in the air, a biting tang of scorched rock always lingering in your throat. It's mid-December, and London's settling into one of its infamous cold snaps, the kind where even the gas lamps shudder. People hustle past, heads down, faces hidden under layers of wool and tweed. You're wearing as much as you can afford. 2 pairs of stockings, an undershirt, waistcoat, jacket, overcoat, scarf, gloves, still not enough. Your breath fogs the glass of a shop window filled with Christmas gewgaws you can't afford. Despite the season, the city's not sleeping. Bakers open early, the glow from their ovens spilling into the streets, attracting delivery boys and tired mothers like moths. Their hands are chapped and red, tucked under arms or clenched into fists. You catch sight of a match girl, bare fingers, threadbare shawl, peddling fire in a world too frozen to care. That's one of the first brutal truths you learn here. Warmth is currency, and most people are bankrupt. Your feet crunch across a slushy curb and narrowly miss a steaming pile of horse manure. Charming! You step around it, slipping just a little. No one stops to help. Everyone's in survival mode. A constable trudges past in his thick cape, his face pink from windburn, his moustache frosted like a sad little icicle. He nods to you, you nod back. In Edwardian Britain, even your nods are chilly. Above you, chimney pots release endless plumes, as homes desperately battle the cold with coal, thick, sooty and expensive. You can almost map the class divide by the scent of the smoke. Richer neighbourhoods have that deep, steady coal burn. Poorer streets smell like scorched rags and scrap wood. And down alleyways, you'll find whole families huddled around stolen crates, burning anything flammable they can scrounge. Here's a curious tidbit. Edwardian London still has some leftover frost fairs in people's memories, where in the centuries prior, the Thames would freeze over so solidly they'd set up shops, plays and even ox roasts on the river. But now, the Industrial Revolution has warmed the river just enough to ruin the tradition. The frost fair is a memory, the river too busy and too dirty to freeze the same way. But some old-timers still wistfully talk about those lost winters, as if freezing to death on a frozen river were somehow better. A newspaper boy shrieks about headlines you can't quite hear, something about unrest abroad probably, but you're more focused on the fact that he's in short pants in this weather. And that's the Edwardian secret, really. Everyone just pretends they're not cold. It's like a national character trait. You're supposed to stiff upper lip your way through frostbite and chilblains, as if acknowledging your own shivering would offend the monarchy. And while we're here, let's talk class, because how you survive this winter depends heavily on who you are. If you're lucky, you're middle class and have a small coal budget. You might even own a woolen hot water bottle. If you're really lucky, let's say upper crust, you've got servants to warm the bed, stir the fires and keep your gloves preheated. But if you're poor, you're lucky if your home has the glass in the windows and something besides rags stuffed in the cracks. The debate still rages among historians about whether the Edwardian winters were objectively colder than ours today, or whether it's just the lack of insulation, synthetic fabrics, and central heating that makes it feel that way. One side argues that a mini ice age lingered into the 20th century. Others say it's romanticised suffering and poor housing design that really made winters unbearable. Either way, your teeth are chattering just thinking about it. And while you're standing there, barely feeling your toes, a milkman passes by with frost in his beard, pulling a rattling cart. The bottles are already starting to freeze, their tops bulging with ice-capped cream. He gives you a nod too, like you're both in on this joke of a season. You wonder how many fingers he'll still have by spring. You duck into a narrow alley to avoid the wind, and a cat darts past your ankles, fluff doubled against the cold. Somewhere nearby, a woman's voice is singing, soft and cracked, probably trying to stay awake, or sane, or warm, maybe all three. So here you are, wrapped in Edwardian winter. No insulation, no central heating, no mercy. It's grey, gritty, and unrelentingly cold. And you've only just stepped out the front door. The morning commute, Edwardian style, is a cold, damp trudge through streets more obstacle course than roadway. You set off toward your destination. Let's say you're a shop assistant in one of London's countless drapery stores, and immediately regret waking up. Your boots, worn thin and stitched one too many times, soak through with slush before you're half a block from home. The wetness seeps in slow like a curse, chilling your toes until they feel like cold little rocks rattling around in wool. The cobblestones are slick with a delicate glaze of ice, invisible until you're halfway into a skid. You pass an omnibus, its horses plodding along with frost-encrusted nostrils, their breath hanging like ghosts in the air. The driver's wrapped in a greatcoat with a flask tucked into his side pocket, likely more for courage than warmth. The top deck passengers aren't so lucky. They're huddled together, half frozen, gripping the railings with red, gloveless hands. You catch the eye of one poor soul trying to light a cigarette, while the wind plays with the flame like it's a toy. He gives up. Smart man. If you're upper class, or pretending to be, you might have the luxury of a brougham, or even a motor car, assuming it'll start in this weather. Edwardian engines are fickle creatures at the best of times. In winter, they're just frozen metal boxes with trust issues. You'd probably spend 20 minutes cranking it before giving up and asking the butler to push. But you walk. Everyone walks. You share the pavement with chimney sweeps, nannies with perambulators covered in thick wool, and delivery boys balancing bread trays on their heads. The smell of coal smoke hangs everywhere, a gritty perfume clinging to your hair and clothing. It mixes with the sharp scent of manure from the horses, the sour sting of city grime, and the occasional waft of something frying in lard, usually not something you want to identify too closely. You pass by a woman sweeping her stoop, her broom made of bundled twigs and her face set in a grimace. She nods, then spits on the ice to see if it'll melt. It doesn't. Your scarf is doing nothing anymore, just an itchy layer of damp wrapped around your neck, and your breath curls and clings like a second ghostly mouth. It's so cold your nose is trying to freeze shut. Honestly, it kind of succeeds. As you dodge piles of horse droppings, yes, frozen ones too, you try not to step on the hidden traps beneath the snow. Edwardian sanitation is inconsistent. A snow-covered puddle might be a foot deep, or it might be something you never want to identify by touch alone. Sometimes, slush hides garbage or broken bottles, making your commute not just cold but hazardous to your health. One misstep and you're limping the rest of the way to work with an Edwardian tetanus cocktail brewing in your leg. The sheer amount of time you spend moving just to exist in this world is exhausting. Public transport exists, sure, but it's not heated, rarely punctual, and not immune to weather shutdowns. If the roads are too iced over, or the horses too spooked, your tram might simply not arrive. And if you're late to work, that's your pay docked, or your position gone. The Edwardian job market is about as forgiving as an iceberg. Now here's the quirky twist to all this misery. Edwardian etiquette still expects you to look presentable by the time you arrive. You're supposed to show up cleanish, composed, and with your hat in the right place. Never mind that your boots are soaked through and your coat's stiff from ice at the hems. There's a sort of national pride in pretending you're not affected by weather. A British endurance sport of quiet, frost-bitten dignity. Smile and soldier on. This is especially true if you work indoors with customers. A draper's assistant like you is expected to handle delicate fabrics with frozen fingers, all while maintaining a posture of warmth and grace. Heaven forbid you sneeze into the satin. And don't even think about warming your hands by the stove unless the manager offers first. Spoiler, he won't. Back outside, traffic begins to thicken. The city's waking up, and with it comes the grinding, slipping symphony of wheels on ice. Cart drivers yell at each other as wooden wheels spin uselessly on slick cobbles. Somewhere nearby, a horse loses its footing and goes down hard. People rush to help, not so much out of empathy, but because a collapsed horse is a traffic nightmare. They pour sand and ashes on the ice, an old trick, marginally effective, and try to coax the animal up with desperate murmurs and a bit of shouting. Eventually it stumbles to its feet, legs shaking, and the Sarah road clears again. Just another morning. Somewhere along your walk you pass a row of newspaper vendors warming their hands over tiny braziers, metal bowls filled with whatever fuel they could find. The heat is pitiful, barely more than symbolic. You hover near one just long enough to feel the promise of warmth, then keep moving before someone accuses you of loitering. They always do. At intersections, young boys offer to scrape the ice from your boots for a penny. Their fingers are raw, noses red, but they grin like it's a carnival. Some carry coal scuttles, others buckets of ash, hoping to sell a scoop to desperate homeowners on their way to work. And if you listen, really listen, you can hear the coughs echoing through alleyways and over rooftops. Damp, racking, hollow coughs. The kind that sound like something trying to claw its way out of a chest. Winter doesn't just freeze, it infects. There's some debate among historians about how well the Edwardians managed urban commuting in winter, especially with increasing industrial sprawl. Some argue they adapted remarkably well, even optimising work schedules and pedestrian routes. Others think it was sheer endurance. People just suffered more and complained less. There's little documentation from the working class, so most of what survives comes from wealthier observers who never had to scrape their boots clean in an alley puddle before clocking in. Eventually your workplace looms ahead, a narrow storefront, already fogged with condensation from the inside. The shopkeeper arrives just ahead of you, jangling his keys with frozen fingers. He doesn't greet you, just nods and grunts, unlocking the door while muttering about the pipes. They've frozen again. Of course they have. And so you step inside, feet soaked, cheeks numb, and hands aching from the cold. The shop is barely warmer than the street, and the fire hasn't been lit yet. You take your position behind the counter, your breath still visible as you greet your first customer of the day. Another morning survived. Barely. The first rule of surviving an Edwardian winter? Layer like your life depends on it. Because it does. Your closet, or rather, your wooden wardrobe that creaks like a haunted house, holds the key to whether you'll make it through the season without losing a toe. And what it holds is mostly wool. Thick, itchy, aggressively unfashionable wool. You start your morning ritual with the underlayer, a linen or cotton chemise, still vaguely damp from yesterday's wash, because nothing dries in this weather. For women, that's followed by drawers, yes, the split kind for convenience, then stockings, then maybe flannel petticoats or wool combinations if you're really in for a day outdoors. For men, it's long johns, always long johns. You tug them up with a grimace, because no one has invented elastic that doesn't dig in like a corset made by Satan. Now, let's talk corsets, still very much in play, especially for women in the middle and upper classes. You cinch yourself in, breath slightly abbreviated, because apparently being warm and able to inhale deeply are mutually exclusive. Over that go at least 2 bodices, maybe a thick skirt with another petticoat underneath. Everything adds bulk. You feel like a wool-covered armadillo. Men aren't much better off. You button your waistcoat with stiff fingers, then add a thick overcoat that weighs roughly as much as your self-esteem. Collar up, scarf on, hat secured. Gloves are a gamble. If you're wealthy, they're lined leather. If you're not, they're wool and riddled with holes you pretend not to notice. You look in the mirror and resemble a walking carpet sample. But hey, you're alive. Now if you're a child, things are even worse. Your parents will bundle you up in so many layers that you lose neck mobility. Scarves get wrapped over faces, often tied in back with enough force to gently strangle you. The goal isn't comfort, it's containment. You're a small squeaky parcel of wool and lace, arms outstretched like a penguin, trundling to school or the market or wherever else your caregivers decide to drag you. Here's the fringe fact you didn't ask for but are definitely getting. Some upper-class women in the dead of winter still wore open-work corset covers made of lace and silk, even if the temperature hovered near freezing, because heaven forbid your fashion sense be out of season. There's something wildly Edwardian about freezing to death elegantly. Inside homes, fashion collides with necessity. You wrap shawls around your shoulders. Bed jackets, fluffy, quilted, and slightly ridiculous, are worn at the breakfast table. Sometimes even gloves with the fingertips snipped off so you can still drink your tea without losing dexterity. It's not uncommon to sleep with your hat on. Entire pamphlets are published on how to remain chic while retaining heat, which might as well be titled How to Die Beautifully. And shoes, an abomination in this weather. Leather hardens in the cold and cracks if you're not diligent with polish. Most working class folk only own one pair, which means they get worn through snow, slush and horse muck alike. Your socks never fully dry. You shuffle around with a permanent wet patch in your sole. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have any say in what you wear and a dry place to keep it, you might own a muff. Yes, a muff. Not the giggle-worthy kind, but a thick, fur-lined hand warmer you clutch like a security blanket. Think of it as the Edwardian purse, only instead of lipstick and gum wrappers, it contains hope. Sometimes literally, a warm brick or a heated potato is stashed inside. You grip it like it owes you money. Class makes all the difference here. Upper-class ladies often wear real fur. Fox, ermine, even mink. Their cloaks are lined with velvet and trimmed with decorative buttons that cost more than your rent. The working class, on the other hand, resorts to layering hand-me-downs until they resemble overstuffed furniture. There's no aesthetic. It's survival couture. In rural areas, you'll find folks stuffing newspapers into boots, wrapping feet in rags, or even layering straw beneath skirts to trap body heat. It works, mostly. Your body starts to resemble a thatched roof, and while it might not land you in the pages of the ladies' realm, it will keep your knees from going numb on the walk to the dairy. But here's a little-known fashion twist. Edwardian society was beginning to flirt with the idea of practicality. Shocking, right? Woolen union suits for women started popping up in catalogues. Shorter skirts for walking became semi-acceptable. Bicycle bloomers and sensible boots were still controversial, but they were creeping into wardrobes. You could almost feel feminism approaching, wrapped in weatherproof layers. Still, not everyone agreed. There was considerable debate among moralists about whether bundling up too much encouraged laziness and softness. Yes, seriously, being cold, they claimed, built character. You couldn't make it through a London fog with weak ankles and warm feet. Some even claimed excessive warmth weakened the body's natural resistance. Never mind that your resistance is currently trying to abandon ship via chilblains. You toss on one last layer, maybe a greatcoat or a knitted cloak, and brace yourself. You can barely bend your arms. Turning your head is a 3-point manoeuvre, but you are armoured. For at least 20 minutes you'll feel something resembling warmth. After that your body will begin to shut down the extremities, and you'll once again discover the joy of wiggling your fingers for circulation every block and a half. A neighbour shuffles past, layered in mismatched wool, with a hot brick tied in a cloth and slung over her shoulder like a sad heating pad. You trade a look, solidarity and thermal absurdity. Neither of you will win any fashion medals today, but that's not the point. The point is not dying. Because in Edwardian Britain, warmth isn't comfort. It's a strategy. It's a full-body negotiation between dignity and survival. It's the art of wearing everything you own while pretending it was intentional. And now that you're finally dressed, puffing slightly under your 5-pound coat and itchy collar, you look outside and realise the snow's coming down harder. Flakes the size of shillings spiral in the air. The wind howls like it's mocking you. But you've got your scarf, your gloves, your potato-stuffed muff. You're ready. Probably. You step back inside your Edwardian home just for a moment, and the cold follows you in like an unwanted guest. The outside may be frigid, but inside, it's not much better. Your breath still curls into the air like cigarette smoke. The walls are thick, made of stone or brick, but insulation is mostly a dream, unless you count tapestries and stubborn hope. This place isn't meant to hold heat. It's more of a decorative suggestion than a shelter. The hearth is the heart of the house, and your entire winter survival depends on it. There's a fireplace in the main room if you're lucky, but nowhere else. Bedrooms, iceboxes, kitchens, barely warmer, and only if someone's been cooking all morning. The fire in the parlour sputters as you poke it to life, sending a plume of smoke up the flue. You cough. Every good fire starts with a little minor lung damage. You toss on a few pieces of coal from the scuttle, watching them spark to life. Coal dust is everywhere. In your hair, your lungs, even your tea if you don't cover the pot. but it's the only thing keeping you from freezing to death in your own sitting room. The coal man delivers twice a week, if the roads are clear. His cart leaves sooty black trails on the cobbles, and his voice is always hoarse from yelling and weather. You pay by the sack. The quality varies, and so does the burn. Sometimes the coal hisses and pops like it's got secrets. But you don't just rely on coal, you layer the tricks, literally. You place a fire brick in the grate to retain heat longer. You close off doors to rooms you don't need. Heavy curtains hang not just at windows but across doorways to trap warmth in a single area. At night you bank the fire carefully, burying it in ash to keep a slow burn till morning. It's like babysitting a sleepy volcano. In the evening the room gets a faint orange glow, shadows dancing up the wallpaper like they're telling stories. You huddle close with a blanket over your knees, one hand on a mug of something warm, likely weak tea or watered ale, and the other extended as close to the fire as you dare without singeing your knuckles. The cat, if you're smart enough to have one, claims the closest spot, curled in a tight ball of smug fluff. Now let's talk chimney maintenance, because yes, it matters. A blocked flue doesn't just mean smoke, it means death. Chimney sweeps, often boys as young as 8, crawl up inside those narrow shafts, scraping soot with little more than a brush in sheer desperation. There's always the fear of them getting stuck. It happens more than you'd like to think. That's the fringe horror no one wants to dwell on. Your cosy winter evening might have once depended on a child coughing inside your chimney like a Dickensian poltergeist. Of course, the fireplace is just one part of the warmth game. The rest is about managing what little heat you can generate. You roll up cloths or rags to block the drafts from windows and under doors. You shove newspaper in gaps in the walls. If you're extra desperate, you nail bits of carpet to the walls for insulation. It's ugly, but at least the frost won't bloom on the wallpaper like some floral revenge of nature. And speaking of wallpaper, there's an ongoing scholarly debate about whether it helped keep homes warmer or made no difference at all. Some argue the extra layer of paper and paste gave a marginal buffer against cold air. Others say it just provided a surface for condensation to freeze prettily in the mornings. Either way, you're scraping frost off your walls before breakfast, so you're not sure it matters. Let's not forget lighting. Gas lamps, candles and oil lanterns all contribute a tiny bit of warmth, but mostly they make the room glow just enough to remind you how much you're shivering. The gas lamps hiss and flicker when it's windy outside, like they're nervous too. Candles smoke if the wicks are cheap. Oil lamps stink. But light in winter is gold. Darkness is colder somehow, like it conspires with the frost. When you head to bed, you carry the warmth with you. Literally. You've heated a brick in the fire, wrapped it in flannel, and tucked it under the covers an hour before you lie down. It's still warm by the time you climb in. If you're fortunate, you have a metal hot water bottle. Heavy, efficient, and liable to scald you if you're not careful. You stuff your bed with layers, wool blankets, patched quilts, sometimes even your coat if it's really bad. Sleeping in your day clothes isn't uncommon. At least your body heat stays trapped. Sort of. And yes, you sleep with your hat on. Everyone does. And socks. You double them up, even though they keep sliding off in the night. The room itself is freezing. You can see your breath in the moonlight. If you stick your nose out from under the covers, it immediately regrets it. Some of the wealthy install heating stoves in their bedrooms, cast iron contraptions fed with coal or wood, but most people, they just endure. The morning ritual of dashing from the bed to the fireplace and lighting it with numb fingers is a universal misery. The cold in the morning is aggressive, stabbing into your bones like you owe it money. And here's your historical oddity for the night. Some families kept pigs, not just for food, but as literal bed warmers. Yes, pigs, warm, fat, and willing to share a blanket. Not exactly cosy in a perfume-ad kind of a way, but surprisingly effective. Chickens too in some households. If it's got body heat and doesn't bite, it's welcome in bed. As night deepens, your fire dwindles. The shadows stretch longer. You shuffle to the fireplace, poke the embers one last time, and hope the smoke doesn't curl back into the room again. The coal is almost gone. You make a note to buy more, even though the budget's tight, but you'll find a way. You always do, because Edwardian winters don't play fair. They seep into your walls, your sheets, your bones. They test your patience and your resourcefulness. But if you can master the art of keeping that one room warm, the one where you eat, sleep, dream, you might just make it to spring. Upstairs, the cold is a whole new beast. It doesn't matter how much coal you burned in the fireplace below. None of that heat has made the journey to your bedroom, The staircase is a wind tunnel, the banisters icy to the touch, and your breath fogs the air like you're standing outside on a moonless night. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders and shuffle to your room, each step accompanied by the dull creak of old floorboards, and the occasional betrayal of a cold draft slicing between gaps in the wall. The door to your bedroom opens with that familiar resistance, like the wood has expanded in the damp, and the chill that greets you is deep, still, and unwelcoming. Your mattress sits like a slab of refrigerated bread, and the sheets are so cold they seem to crackle as you peel them back. You consider leaving your boots on. You seriously consider sleeping in your coat. You've done it before. There's no fireplace here. Only a faded rug, thin curtains, and the sense that someone forgot to inform this room it's part of a house and not a shed in the Arctic. You move quickly, because the goal is not a hopeless comfort. It's to get under the covers and stay very, very still until your body temperature climbs from near corpse to barely tolerating this. And then, just when you think you've reached maximum discomfort, you remember the chamber pot. Because yes, you will have to use the bathroom eventually, and no, there is no running water upstairs, and certainly no toilet. There's a chamber pot under the bed, which you use with the precision and desperation of someone who refuses to walk through an unheated house in the middle of the night. God help you if you're sharing the room. Chamber pot etiquette is not written down, but it is very, very real. In the morning someone, probably you, will carry it outside, praying the contents haven't frozen into some horrible lumpy sculpture. The poor in tenements sometimes empty theirs into communal cesspits that freeze over in winter, which causes all sorts of backup. It's a season of unpleasant improvisations. You climb into bed now, inching in like you're afraid to disturb the icy sheets, and pull the covers over your head. Underneath it's dark and still. You curl around your heated brick if you were lucky enough to get one tonight. It's wrapped in a sock, giving off a gentle, fading warmth. You cradle it like it's a newborn, except this one won't scream or inherit anything. The straw-stuffed mattress crunches softly beneath you. There's a smell, musty wool, cold air, maybe a bit of damp wood. The kind of smell you stopped noticing by February. You lie there stiff as a board, trying to fall asleep before your toes decide to stage a rebellion. And here's the real kicker. No one sleeps through the night in an Edwardian winter, not unless they're sedated with brandy or born with magic powers. The cold wakes you in the early hours, a creeping, numbing reminder that your little heat bubble has collapsed. Your nose is cold, your fingers ache. You pull the covers tighter and shift your body weight toward any patch of warmth you can find. Sometimes you can hear the sounds of others stirring. Floorboards groan as someone tiptoes toward the stairwell, maybe to stoke the fire, maybe to cough their lungs out in peace. A baby cries in the next room, short, sharp, almost apologetic. Someone whispers, probably offering comfort or just bargainings with fate for 5 more minutes of quiet. And the worst part, you can see your breath, inside your own bed. You blow a small cloud upward like a forlorn dragon. It dissipates slowly, trailing toward the ceiling. In the lamplight from the street outsider, you can see the frost feathering along the inside of the window panes. Delicate, beautiful, murderous. There's actually a superstition floating around that breathing in too much cold air while you sleep can turn your blood. Not literally, but people claim it thins you, makes you weaker. So folks tie scarves around their faces, or even sleep with a bit of cloth over their mouths, like tiny homemade masks. It doesn't do much except make you wake up with a damp cloth on your lips and the unsettling feeling you are suffocating slowly. By now, the chamber pot is calling. You try to ignore it. You try to will your bladder into submission. But it's no use. You groan, slip one arm out from under the blankets, and wince as the frigid air bites at your skin. You retrieve the pot with all the dignity of someone who's been thoroughly humbled by winter. When you're done, you tuck it back under the bed like a shameful secret and dive back beneath the covers, trying to find that tiny square of warmth left by your own body. Historians still debate just how bad these unheated bedrooms were. Some argue it built resilience, that Edwardians just accepted a kind of background suffering we modern folks can't comprehend. Others suggest the rates of respiratory illness and winter mortality tell a more honest story. Influenza, pneumonia, tuberculosis, they all thrive in cold, damp conditions, and Edwardian bedrooms might as well have been petri dishes for all three. The upper classes, of course, had their solutions. Bed warmers made of brass and filled with hot coals, heated water bottles with embroidered covers, servants who lit fires in their rooms an hour before bedtime, canopy beds with curtains to trap warmth, thick feather mattresses, and someone else to empty their chamber pots. Their winters were still cold, but more of an inconvenience than a trial. Meanwhile, you're a blanket burrito with trust issues. You drift in and out of sleep, your dreams weirdly focused on sun, fire, or being eaten by wolves, maybe all three. Every time you roll over, you wince at the icy sheets and wish absurdly for summer. But the real miracle? You'll do it again tomorrow night, and the night after. Because Edwardian winter doesn't care. It's not here to be poetic or picturesque. It's here to test your will. And as long as you can light that fire downstairs and make it to bed without freezing solid, you're still in the game. You wake up stiff and miserable with your body curled into a shape no spine was ever meant to hold. Your fingers ache. Your toes feel like they've spent the night in a bucket of snow. The window is glazed with a sheet of ice so thick it looks like the ghost of winter itself is trying to break in. You draw a deep breath, hoping the air will be a bit warmer. It isn't. It's biting, dry, and tastes faintly of old coal smoke and damp wool. This is where the real Edwardian magic begins, the slow, stubborn, daily climb out of frozen discomfort towards something that vaguely resembles functionality. Your first stop is the kitchen, or scullery, or shared basement stove nook, depending on where you fall on the social ladder. If you're middle or working class, this is where everything happens. Cooking, washing, warming up your face over a bubbling pot. If you're a servant, you're already down here, hours before anyone else wakes up, building the first fire of the day and cursing hoarsely under your breath as the flue refuses to draw. The stove groans as you feed it kindling and pray for a decent draft. Once the flames take, you get that familiar glow on your face. The relief of something almost warm. It's not much. You can still see your breath, but at least you don't feel like you're being slowly cryogenically preserved anymore. You fill the kettle and set it on to boil. Everything takes longer in winter. The water's thick, reluctant. The flame under the kettle flickers like it's considering quitting. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders again, because yes, you've been wearing it all night, and start pulling out the day's breakfast basics. Oatmeal if you're lucky, bread if you're not. Maybe a bit of bacon fat spread thin over toast. A working class staple so unglamorous it never even made it into period dramas. The kitchen itself is a place of contrasts. There's the stove belching warmth in one direction, and then the corners of the room, which might as well be the Antarctic. Your breath fogs up in patches as you move from one side of the room to the other. You open a cupboard and it's colder inside than out. The butter is stiff and the bread cracks as you try to slice it. The jam has formed a crust. You consider dunking everything in hot tea. That's the answer to most problems in this era anyway. For the truly poor, breakfast in winter might be just tea and whatever you can toast over a flame. That's why a good fire is everything. It's not just heat, it's hope. The working class clings to it like a lifeline. You warm your socks over it, dry your gloves, heat your meals and toast your fingers until they start to hurt in reverse. That strange pins and needles thawing ache that says you're not dead yet. There's a trick people use to make breakfast more bearable. The kitchen chair pulled right up to the stove, turned sideways so your back gets the heat. You perch there like some squat monarch on a makeshift throne of discomfort, cupping your tea and soaking in every crumb of heat like it's being rationed. You don't talk much in the mornings. The cold takes language away. It replaces conversation with teeth chattering and the occasional bloody hell. And now let's talk about soup, because in the Edwardian winter, soup is king. You start it in the morning, letting it simmer all day. A bit of bone, maybe a chopped onion, carrots if you have them, barley when you're feeling rich. It's the sort of thing that smells better than it tastes. But it's hot and thick and fills you up in that weighted down, slow burn kind of a way. Every family has their own version, and most of them include ingredients that have no business being in the same pot. But when you're that cold, even weird soup is a luxury. The poorest neighbourhoods have communal kitchens or charity soup depots. You bring your own bowl or pot, stand in line with 100 other frozen souls, and hope they don't run out before you get there. The broth is thin, the bread's hard, but it's warm, and that makes all the difference. Winter hunger hits differently. It gnaws deeper. There's a fringe fact that sometimes gets passed around. Some families would stick soup in a can and tuck it in their coat to use as a makeshift hand warmer on the walk to work, then eat it later for lunch. Multi-purpose cuisine. That's Edwardian efficiency. Meanwhile, upstairs, you're figuring out how to wash your face without crying. The water in the basins freezing. Not just cold. Freezing. You break the surface tension like you're punching through glass. There's a little sliver of ice floating around in it. You splash it on your face with a small gasp that turns into a groan. The cold is a slap, a punishment, a dare. If you're middle class, you might have a small jug of hot water brought up by a servant, if you can afford one and if they didn't freeze their hands carrying it. But for most, it's a quick, miserable scrub. Teeth brushing happens with a dab of tooth powder and more icy water. The bristles on the brush are stiff from the chill. You wonder if your gums have gone numb or if they've just given up on sending signals to your brain. And your clothes, still damp from yesterday, you hold them up in front of the fire, trying to steam the worst of the chill out of them before you put them on. Underthings especially. You learn quickly to avoid putting on anything that's touched the outside wall overnight. It's practically frostbitten. You dress in layers again, your breath puffing in the room with every button fastened, every stocking pulled up. There's a silent desperation in winter dressing. You want to be warm, but also mobile. Your clothes crackle from dryness or stick to your skin from dampness. You say a little prayer over your boots. May they not leak today, and may the laces not snap in the cold like they did last Tuesday. Outside, you can already hear the clatter of carts, the distant shouts of the milkman, the bell from the bakery as the first loaf hits the counter. You wrap your scarf, slip on your gloves, and head out again, hoping the soup at lunch is better than last time and that the wind's shifted just enough to miss your face on the walk to work. Because really, that's the rhythm of it all. Wake, fire, warm, soup, work, repeat. You find ways to get through. A hot drink, a lucky pair of socks, a few extra embers in the grate, maybe a good story around the fire if you're lucky, or just someone to share your chair with when the world goes dark and cold and sharp again. There's a chill even the fire can't reach, and you'll find it in the household hierarchy. The warmth in an Edwardian home is distributed, just like everything else, by class, status and proximity to power. Downstairs, where the servants live and work, the winter isn't just inconvenient. It's personal. It seeps into every task, every corner of the scullery, every bucket of ice-cold water hauled up from the pump. Upstairs, where the drawing room flickers with soft firelight and someone might serve you tea with lemon, you'd almost think winter wasn't that bad. That illusion costs money, and usually someone else is suffering. If you're one of the house staff, and you are, at least for tonight, you wake before the sun rises. Your boots go on cold, your sleeves stick to your damp skin, and you move like a ghost through a house that doesn't want to wake up. Your first job? Stoke the fires. Not one. All of them. The one in the drawing room, the one in the study, the one in the master bedroom if you're lucky. You light them before the household sees daylight, and usually before you've had a single sip of tea. You do it with red raw fingers that haven't thawed in weeks. The bucket of coal bangs against your knee as you carry it from grate to grate, hoping the dust doesn't cling too visibly to your already tired uniform. The kitchen fire you lit at 4:45 a.m. is the only one that gives off any real warmth, and even that's not for you. It's for the porridge, the boiling water, the toast. You grab bits of heat where you can, hands hovered near the oven door, cheeks brushed against warm copper pots, but you never stay long. There's no time. The mistress wants hot coffee. The master's bath must be ready. Little Miss Adelaide's boots must be warmed and waiting by the schoolroom door. God forbid they be cold when she slips her tiny, privileged feet into them. Meanwhile, your own room, the attic space barely tall enough to stand in, is frozen stiff. You sleep next to a sloped wall, and the plaster near your pillow is speckled with frost most mornings. No one lights your fire because there isn't one. You curl up under thin blankets and wear your work dress to bed, just to keep from having to change in the morning's frost-laced air. There's a chamber pot, cracked and stained, and if it sloshes when you carry it down in the morning, you pray no one notices. Servants are meant to be invisible, especially when they're uncomfortable. If you're part of the family upstairs, the winter experience is tailored for comfort. The drawing room is a warm haven, glowing with lamplight and the crackling of coal. The family gathers in the evenings with books, knitting, and soft murmured conversation. A bell rings when more tea is needed. You answer it. They don't worry about firewood, frost, or frozen sheets. Those are your problems. And let's not forget the bathrooms, or lack thereof. A grand home might have a full indoor lavatory with a flushing toilet and hot running water. But even then, it's the family bathroom. Servants use a cold tap in the scullery or a metal basin in the corner of their attic room. Baths are rare, unless you count the weekly tin tub placed in the kitchen near the stove. You fill it by kettle, you empty it by hand. You scrub with carbolic soap so strong it makes your knuckles crack. Meanwhile, upstairs, the lady of the house reclines in a ceramic tub with lavender oil and a book of poetry. The servants are the ones who carried the hot water up 3 flights of stairs to make it happen. The contrast is brutal. Upstairs, there's foot-warming pans slid between the sheets before bed. There's thick carpets, heavy drapes, and servants to close the windows properly. Downstairs, there are drafty corridors and stone floors so cold your toes go numb through your shoes. The kitchen door leaks wind. The laundry room is an icebox where the wet sheets freeze to the line. You wring them out until your arms burn and your wrists ache, and you pray they dry by week's end. And yet, for all its harshness, the servant class develops its own strange code of winter survival. Little tricks pass down from one to another. You learn to warm your boots by resting them briefly near the oven. You place newspaper inside your corset to cut the wind. You rub goose fat on your hands and wrap them in cloth overnight. Yes, it's greasy, and yes, it works. You steal leftover tea leaves to dry and rebrew later. You stand near the stovepipe when no one's looking, just to feel its quiet warmth radiate into your spine. There's an unspoken solidarity downstairs. You share soup. You whisper gossip. You laugh about the ridiculousness of Miss Adelaide's 20-minute tantrum over mittens. And when the frost creeps in through the pantry walls, you press your palms against the warm dishwater and close your eyes, just for a second. It's not peace, but it's something. Historians often debate just how miserable servant life really was during these winters. Some point to the strict hierarchies, the long hours, the cold sleeping quarters, and say it bordered on cruelty. Others argue that for many young women and men, domestic service was one of the few options that offered regular meals, a roof, and at least some form of stability. What's less debated is the physical cost. The chilblains, the cracked heels, the frostbitten fingers, the endless low-level ache of a body overworked and underheated. And yet, life continues. You hang clothes out to dry, then bring them in, frozen stiff like planks of wood. You knead bread near the oven so your fingers thaw as you work. You pour slop for the pigs and chop carrots in gloves. You endure because you don't have a choice. Winter in an Edwardian household isn't equal. It never was. The house may groan and creak as a single unit, but its warmth is compartmentalised, reserved for the ones who can afford not to think about it. Later that night, after the silver's polished and the fires are banked, you slip back into your attic room. You tuck your shawl around your shoulders and lie down fully dressed again. You listen to the wind rattle the window pane, and the faint clink of ice shifting in the gutter outside. Downstairs, the drawing room embers fade quietly. You close your eyes and think about hot tea, and maybe tomorrow, if the weather turns, you'll have time to stand in the kitchen a minute longer and feel the fire on your face. School in an Edwardian winter is a brutal initiation, an unspoken pact between generations that children, no matter how small or sniffling, must brave the elements and sit still in freezing rooms while trying to learn long division with fingers that barely bend. You pull on your stiff boots, button your jacket all the way to the chin, and head out the door, scarf flapping like a banner of reluctant obedience. Your satchel is slung over one shoulder, but the real burden is the cold which gnaws at your face before you even make it to the front gate. The walk to school isn't picturesque. It's damp, grey, and often perilous. The path is packed snow with patches of black ice waiting to send you sprawling into a puddle of icy shame. Snowballs occasionally fly, not the playful kind, but ones packed hard enough to raise welts, especially when launched by older boys with grudges and good aim. You trudge on, muttering into your scarf, trying to keep your hands jammed deep in your pockets. Gloves are a luxury. If you've got them, they are likely fingerless and full of holes, and you've already lost the matching pair 3 winters ago. Arriving at school offers no comfort. The building is a stone structure that retains cold like it's been carefully curated. The windows are tall, leaded, and drafty. You walk into the classroom and immediately feel your soul cry a little. Your desk is a splintered ancient plank with an inkwell frozen solid in its little groove. You breathe into your hands and blow on your ink pot, hoping it'll thaw enough to produce a single letter without cracking your nib. The teacher, bundled in a wool shawl and the kind of grim patience only educators possess, claps her hand sharply and announces that the lesson will begin. She's got a cane by her side, not just for discipline, but possibly to fend off frostbite. The chalkboard squeaks, you shiver. The air smells of damp wool, coal smoke, and boiled cabbage from someone's lunch pail. You settle in. Your fingers, already numb, struggle to grasp the pencil. Writing is an act of courage. The ink doesn't flow, and your breath leaves damp circles on your exercise book as you hunch closer for warmth. Slates are common in the younger classes, and every time you write, your chalk squeals and the board's surface sticks slightly. Cold on cold. The girl next to you sneezes into her sleeve, sniffles loudly, and carries on like it's nothing, because it is nothing. Everyone's sniffling. Everyone has a cough. The cold is constant background noise, so are the sore throats, the red noses, and the desperate desire for someone to drop a hot brick in your lap. Recess offers no relief. You're shuffled out into the yard with instructions to get fresh air, which in practice means skidding across the ice or huddling in a group behind the outside privy, where the wall blocks the wind a little. There are always a few who try to play, kicking a frozen ball around or organising a short-lived snowball skirmish, but most just stand there, arms crossed, teeth chattering, waiting for the bell to call them back inside to their semi-frozen desks. Latrines, if you're wondering, are outdoors. Cold, grim, and barely better than going behind a tree. You hold your breath as long as possible and hope no one followed you to pull the door open mid-squat. Some schools upgrade to indoor toilets in the cities, but even those are more theoretical comforts than actual improvements. Water pipes freeze, doors don't close properly. You return to class with the cold still clinging to your legs like a wet stocking. Lunch is a glimmer of hope. You open your pale or cloth-wrapped bundle to reveal bread, maybe jam, maybe some leftover stew if you're especially lucky and your family has a kettle on the stove all morning. Everything is cold meat, cold cheese, cold tea in a bottle that might have been warm once but is now just a damp reminder of better times. You chew quickly, huddled near the radiator, if the building has one, and it works, which is never guaranteed. Teachers endure it too, wrapped in layers, fingers red and stiff, chalk crumbling under their touch. They keep teaching though. Recitations, Latin drills, arithmetic. You try to focus, but your toes are staging a rebellion in your boots. Some days, you're not sure if you're absorbing knowledge or just slowly freezing into a more educated statue. Now, here's your quirky detail for the night. In particularly bad winters, some teachers would bring in heated stones or bricks wrapped in cloth and set them at the foot of the classroom for children to rotate, turn standing beside. A sort of shared, slow-roasted moment of reprieve. If you got too close, your socks would steam. If you stood too far, you'd miss your chance entirely. There was a pecking order to it, of course. The older boys muscled in first, the younger kids got whatever warmth was left. At the end of the day, the bell rings and the stampede begins. Children bolt for the door like the building is collapsing behind them. Outside, it's getting dark. The winter sun barely bothers to show up most days, and by 4 in the afternoon the street lamps are already lit. Your walk home is quieter, more resigned. You pass other children heading in other directions, all with the same blank, slightly wind-chapped expressions of survival. You try not to slip. You fail, you laugh it off and brush the snow off your sleeve, because there's still pride left somewhere under the layers. Back at home, your mother is tending to the fire, and the house smells like boiled potatoes and something vaguely meaty. You hang your coat by the hearth, not that it'll dry fully before tomorrow, and peel off your wet socks. Your toes are red and angry looking. Someone hands you a bowl of something hot, soup again, and you wrap your fingers around it like it's gold. There's a debate among historians about just how miserable Edwardian schooling really was in the winter. Some suggest the accounts are exaggerated, that the hardship built character and created resilient children. Others argue it was nothing short of institutionalized discomfort, contributing to stunted growth, poor health, and a deep, lifelong resentment of anything involving chalk. Either way, you lived through another school day. You didn't lose a finger. You copied your Latin phrases. You narrowly avoided being hit by an ice lump snowball. That's a win. You climb into bed that night with tired legs and frozen memories, knowing tomorrow will be just like today, and that somehow that's enough. Even if you've got a roof over your head, a job to trudge to and soup at the end of the day, you're still better off than the countless Edwardians who call the street their home. And in winter, the street is especially cruel. It doesn't care about your age, your story, or whether your boots have soles. If you're poor and outdoors when the frost settles in, you quickly learn that the city's cold isn't just weather. It's a slow, quiet predator. You wake up beneath a blanket that's more holes than cloth. It might be shared with a sibling, a parent, or a stranger. If you're lucky, you've tucked yourself into the doorway of a bakery or behind the steam grate near a laundry. But there's no real escape. The damp has already gotten into your bones. Your hair is crusted with frost where your breath rose and fell against it through the night. You don't unfold yourself, you unthaw. And the day begins not with a plan, but with a question. How do you stay warm enough to stay alive? Street life in Edwardian winter is a grim education in resourcefulness. You start moving the moment your eyes open. Movement is heat. You keep walking, sometimes in circles, sometimes to nowhere in particular. Public buildings are your salvation and your curse. Churches might let you sit for a while, but the pews are unheated, and you're not always welcome. Libraries are warmer, but expect quiet, and librarians don't love the smell of people who haven't had a real wash in a month. You don't blame them, but it doesn't stop you from slipping inside and sitting as close to the gas lamp as possible until someone asked you to leave. For food and warmth, you turn to the markets. Outdoor stalls bustle even in the snow, though fewer vendors show up when the weather turns vicious. You hover near the roasted chestnut sellers, breathing in the smoky, sweet warmth of the fire that crackles beneath their carts. You don't buy, of course not, but you stand there long enough to feel your fingers again. Some sellers chase you off, others don't. The real saints toss you a cracked chestnut when no one's looking. One of the quiet tragedies of winter is the match girl. They're everywhere. Thin arms wrapped in rags, matches bundled tightly in their palms, their breath freezing as they whisper, "Buy a box, sir?" They don't sell much. People are in too much of a hurry, but the girls keep offering, their eyes hollow but persistent. There's a reason that one fairy tale ends the way it does. Cold isn't metaphorical here. It's real. It's final. And yet, in this frozen underworld, there's an odd sense of rhythm. The shoe shiners still sitting on wooden boxes with frost crusting the edges. The street musicians wrapped in shawls and old military coats, playing fiddles or harmonicas with numb fingers. You've got the lamplighters too, those silent silhouettes who emerge at dusk to light the gas lamps with long poles. Faces shadowed by caps, their breath hanging in clouds as they step from street to street like melancholy angels. One lamplighter, you know, old Bertie, wears a ridiculous pair of mittens tied with string around his wrists. He says they were his mother's. They're pink and knitted and unravelling at the edges. Every winter you think this will be the one where you stop seeing him. Every spring he's still there, shuffling along with his slow careful gait and a pipe clamped between his teeth, unlit but comforting. Beggars huddle near the church steps, bundled in layers that resemble nests more than clothing. Some are veterans, too broken for factory work. Some are women with infants swaddled tight against them, whispering lullabies into tiny blue-tinged ears. The city doesn't pause for any of them. Horses clop past, wheels splash icy slush onto legs already soaked. Life rolls on, and the cold sharpens everything, poverty, hunger, fatigue, like a knife honed onto stone. At night, you look for heat wherever you can. Boiler rooms, if you're brave. They are dangerous, illegal often, and full of rats, but they're warm. Sometimes you sneak into abandoned houses, wrapping yourself in curtains or crawling into cupboards just to escape the wind. The police might drag you out or not. It depends on the constable. Some look the other way. Others believe suffering builds character. There's an ongoing debate among historians about the homeless population in Edwardian Britain, especially in London. Some records suggest their numbers surged during harsh winters. Others argue that census data underrepresented transient populations, especially women and children. What's not debated is the toll it took. Frostbite, pneumonia and starvation weren't just possibilities, they were weekly statistics. The workhouse offered shelter, yes, but at a steep price: your freedom, your family's unity and your dignity. Many chose the streets over that cold, bureaucratic version of salvation. Still, the city has its own quiet alliances. A shopkeeper might leave out stale bread. A washerwoman might share a cup of broth. Children band together, forming packs for safety and warmth. They stuff newspapers into their coats for insulation, sleep in stairwells, and use each other's bodies as human blankets. It's bleak. It's brilliant. It's survival. Edwardian style. And then there's the snow. When it falls, it briefly transforms the misery into something surreal. The city hushes. Gas lamps glow soft halos in the darkness. Even the beggars lift their eyes. Children, those still lucky enough to have boots and energy, race through the snowbanks with shrieks of laughter, crafting lopsided snowmen and throwing crooked snowballs. For a minute, winter is magical. And then your fingers go numb again. You find your corner, a dry stoop with a bit of overhead shelter, and curl into yourself like you're trying to vanish. The wind whistles down the alley, and you tuck your scarf tighter. Pressing your chin into your chest, you close your eyes, not because you're sleepy, but because it's easier than staring at the frost inching toward your feet. Some people won't wake up tomorrow. That's the reality. But most will, because Edwardians are stubborn. They grumble, shuffle, layer up and move forward. The city may try to freeze you out, but you refuse to go quietly. Not yet. You've made it to market day, and despite the heavy frost clinging to the cobblestones and the bitter wind that slices through your coat like it's got something personal against you, you're here, along with half of the city. The streets are lined with stalls under sagging tarps, breath misting above each vendor like tiny weather systems of their own. And everything is cold. The produce, the coins in your pocket, the hands passing you a half-dozen eggs, all of it stiff with the stubborn chill that never lets up in Edwardian winter. Your fingers barely work. The wool gloves you're wearing have a thumb hole and one of the fingertips has surrendered entirely. You try to tug your scarf higher over your nose, but it's stiff from yesterday's snow and now smells faintly of coal smoke and cabbage. Welcome to the working-class marketplace in December, where nothing is warm and no one pretends otherwise. You start with the vegetable stand. The carrots are limp and icy. The turnips are rock hard, like they've given up trying to be edible and now aspire to be weapons. Cabbages still look fairly smug, but they always do. Root vegetables are the stars of this season, not because they're especially delicious, but because they survive, much like you. You tap one of the potatoes. It thuds back at you with a dull, frozen solidity that's vaguely insulting. You put it in your sack anyway. The butcher's stall is a more visceral experience. Steam rises off the raw cuts displayed on wooden tables. They are not kept cold so much as kept outside. The weather does the preservation work. Chickens hang by their feet from iron hooks, their eyes dull and glazed. A thick-jowled man in a blood-specked apron hacks at a side of mutton with casual aggression. His breath puffs around him as he nods at you. You nod back. Polite silence is the currency here, along with the shillings clutched in your shaking hand. Meat is expensive. Maybe you settle for scraps, neck bones, lard trimmings, maybe even a slice of calf's head if you're feeling extravagant. You're planning soup again. Always soup. It stretches better than anything else and warms you from the inside out, at least until the walk home refreezes your intestines. The fishmonger is doing a roaring trade, oddly enough. He's surrounded by crates of herring packed in ice. Not that the ice is needed. The fish stare up with glassy, unamused eyes. Salted cod sits beside smoked eels coiled like grumpy noodles. If you're lucky, you get a deal on yesterday's kippers. If not, you get whatever's cheapest and hope it doesn't taste like the bottom of the Thames. Let's not ignore the smell. Winter doesn't mask odours, it mummifies them. Every scent lingers in the cold air like it's frozen mid-sneeze. You get whiffs of fish guts, smoke, overripe onions, wet wool and someone's unwashed dog. Occasionally something sweet wafts in from the baker's stall. Fresh rolls, molasses cake, maybe warm treacle bread. It hits your nose like a dream you can't afford. You loiter near the stall, letting the warm scent wrap around your face for just a second too long before the baker eyes you suspiciously. And then there are the hands. Everyone's hands. Red, chapped, cracked open at the knuckles. Sellers warm their fingers by lanterns or blow into their palms between transactions. Some wear gloves with no fingers so they can handle coins. Others just power through, numb and grimacing, as they weigh out beans or pour milk from a near-frozen jug. You hand over your coins with stiff fingers, trying not to fumble. Every coin dropped is a miniature tragedy, especially if it lands in the slush. Oh, and let's talk about slush. Market slush is not normal slush. It's not cute or festive. It's a half-frozen, half-liquid stew of snow, ash, manure and mystery juice. Every step is a gamble. The hems of your skirt or trousers get soaked, and then the water freezes. You feel it stiffen as you walk, your clothing slowly transforming into icy armour you never asked for. The cobblers have a table too. They've got rows of leather boots, some new, some clearly second-hand, and most with price tags that make you laugh softly to yourself, but people still stop. They press down on soles, eye the stitching. Consider how many more winters they can get from one last patch job. The cobbler's hands are like bark, knotted, cracked, permanently stained. He works with hot glue over a brazier, smoke rising around him in lazy spirals. You overhear one of the barrow boys coughing behind a stack of crates, an ugly wet cough that sounds like it's lived in his lungs for decades, even though he's no older than 10. He wipes his mouth with a sleeve and keeps hauling. There's no rest here. If you stop moving, you stop earning. If you stop earning, you stop eating. If you stop eating in a winter like this, well, you already know how that ends. There's a fringe story often told about market vendors using hot potatoes as both lunch and hand warmers. You buy one, clutch it like a holy relic, and nibble the ends when the skin splits open. It's not a full meal, but it's something. You pass another buyer doing the same. You nod at each other like fellow soldiers, and then there's the bartering. Coins are scarce. People trade eggs for candles, scraps of cloth for soup bones, even labour for firewood. The deals are made in mutters, often sealed with a handshake, sometimes just trust. It's an economy of desperation, but also of mutual understanding. Everyone's cold, everyone's tired, no one's pretending anymore. There's debate among economic historians about just how flexible Edwardian winter markets really were. Some argue they were rigid and exploitative, especially toward women and children. Others highlight the informal support systems, the cooperative spirit in slum markets, and the way vendors adjusted prices just enough to keep regulars from starving. Both are probably true. It depends on the stall, the seller, the day. You finally make your way toward the edge of the square, arms full of parcels wrapped in reused paper or bundled in cloth. The snow's coming down again, thick, wet flakes that slap your face instead of floating gently. You duck your head, adjust your scarf, and plough forward through the slush. By the time you reach your street, you can't feel your feet. You can't feel your face either. Your stomach's growling, but at least you have food. At least you made it through another market day. Another cold negotiation with a city that never seems to warm up. You open the door to your home and are met with a weak puff of warm air from the single fire in the hearth. You kick off your frozen boots, shake the snow from your shoulders, and begin unpacking. Turnips, a fishtail, half a loaf, and a few sad-looking leeks. But to you it's treasure. Tonight there will be stew, and that's enough to get you through tomorrow. Once a week, if you're lucky and the coins have stretched far enough, you trade the numbness in your limbs for something rare, something coveted, something practically sacred in an Edwardian winter. A proper bath. Not just a wipe with a rag near the stove, not a hopeful dab at your face with frozen water from a basin, but a full, body-immersing, steam-filled heavenly bath. And unless you're among the few with your own tub, and someone else to fill it, it means a trip to the public bathhouse. You brace yourself as you step into the icy street again, towel and soap tucked in a bag beneath your arm, eyes half watering from the wind's slap. The bathhouse isn't close, and the snow today is thick, falling in heavy flakes that stick to your coat like a personal snowstorm. But the thought of hot water drives you forward. That and the memory of last week's bath, which nearly made you cry with gratitude. From the outside, the public baths don't look like much. A squat brick building, soot-streaked, and always surrounded by people waiting their turn. You push through the door, and instantly the air changes. It's warmer. Not quite warm, but warmer. Your face begins to thaw. You smell damp stone, mildew, and strong soap. It's not luxurious. It's utilitarian. But you're already 10% less frozen just standing here. There's a line, of course. There's always a line. Everyone's red-nosed and hunched, shifting on the balls of their feet, clutching their coins and towels like pilgrims waiting to be reborn. You see familiar faces. An old woman with her hair wrapped in a scarf. A chimney sweep with soot still smudged in his ears. A pair of giggling girls who chatter about the cold like it's a guest who's overstayed. You pay your penny, or more depending on the bath, and are handed a key to a cubicle. The floors are wet. Your breath still fogs. The walls echo with splashes and the soft slap of skin against water. Some people sing, others groan softly as they lower themselves into the tubs. You make your way to your assigned stall and open the door. Inside, a chipped porcelain tub, a rusted spout, a wooden slatted floor, and a hook for your clothes. That's it. The bath is pre-filled with hot water, sometimes hot enough, sometimes not. You close the door and strip quickly, body covered in gooseflesh, teeth clenched. The moment you sink into the water, it steals your breath. It is glorious. For one perfect moment you feel alive again. Your muscles unclench, your fingers tingle. Your feet begin to remember what circulation feels like. The warmth seeps into your chest like a hug you didn't know you needed. You close your eyes and let your head fall back, the sound of other bathers fading into a blur of gentle splashes and distant voices. It's a sacred kind of silence. But of course nothing good lasts. There's a time limit. You scrub fast or evenly using the rough soap provided, or your own if you brought it. You scrape away layers of coal dust, sweat and winter grime. Your skin turns red, not from heat but from the friction of effort. You rinse, splash and soak as efficiently as possible, aware of the attendant's ticking pocket watch somewhere outside the door. Here's the fringe bit. Some Edwardians brought onions into the bath, not to eat but to press under their arms. It was thought that onions pulled out bad humours or neutralised odour. You never tried it, but once you saw a woman toss one in like a bath bomb, it bobbed there between her knees. The smell was unforgettable. When time's up, you stand reluctantly, water streaming down your body, the cold air rushing back in with cruel precision. You towel off, pulling on underthings that still feel damp from their time in your bag. Your skin is clean, yes, but already your fingers are starting to chill again. Still, for the first time in a week, you're not crusted in ash or wearing 3 layers of filth. Your scalp tingles, your nails look like they belong to a human again. For the upper classes, this experience is daily. Drawn baths, private tubs, perfumed soaps. Servants carry steaming jugs of water upstairs, draw curtains, and place towels by the fire. Some homes even have early indoor plumbing. You've heard whispers about heated floors and wall-mounted towel racks. Sounds like fantasy. In your world, water is heated on a stove, poured into a tin tub, and reused until it resembles tea with a hint of leg. There's a debate among hygiene historians, yes, that's a thing, about how transformative the public bath movement really was. Some say it revolutionised public health and dignity, giving the working class access to the cleanliness that hadn't existed in centuries. Others argue it was inconsistent and paternalistic, treating cleanliness like a moral obligation rather than a human right. Still, you know this. Stepping out of the bathhouse into the cold is different from walking in. You carry the warmth with you for a while. You walk home slower than usual, savouring the heat that clings to your skin beneath your clothes. The snow is still falling, gentler now. Your boots squish, but your toes aren't numb for once. You pass a child playing with a snow-crusted dog. A man lights a pipe with trembling fingers. A shopkeeper tosses slush from his doorstep with a scowl. You step back into your house, cheeks flushed, hair still damp. Someone remarks you smell cleaner than usual. You don't bother responding, you just sit near the fire, towel draped around your shoulders like a victory banner, steam curling off your skin as if you've been forged anew. Later you'll be cold again, you'll be dirty, the layers will come back on, but for tonight, you've remembered what it's like to feel clean, to feel warm, to be you, beneath the grime. And in the heart of Edwardian winter, that's something like magic. There's a scratch in your throat that wasn't there yesterday. Not quite pain, more like sandpaper pressed softly against your insides. You ignore it. Everyone ignores the first sign. It's winter after all. Coughs come and go like buskers. You press a hand to your forehead. Cool, maybe even cold. That's normal. It's the air, the frost, nothing to worry about. But by the time midday rolls around, your nose is running, your eyes itch, and your head feels like it's been packed in woolen bricks. Welcome to the Edwardian version of the winter flu, a seasonal guest that shows up uninvited and overstays its welcome. You wrap your scarf tighter and keep moving. You have to. The Edwardian world doesn't hit pause just because your joints ache and your bones feel like glass. There's coal to fetch, bread to buy, and laundry that won't wash itself. You work through the fever, cheeks flushed from something that isn't just the fireplace's glow anymore. The cold isn't the worst part. It's the knowledge that your body might just be losing the battle. And here, in this era, that can go sideways fast. Medical care in the early 1900s is a strange beast. Part science, part superstition, and all done in drafty rooms by men with impressive facial hair. You've got options, but none of them are great. The local doctor might stop by if you can afford it. His black bag clinks when he walks, full of glass bottles and sharp instruments. He smells of pipe smoke and strong soap. He'll peer down at you with watery eyes, poke at your glands, maybe listen to your chest with a stethoscope colder than death itself, and mutter something about rest and fluids. Then he'll leave you with a bitter tincture and a bill that makes your stomach twist harder than the fever does. But if money's tight, and let's face it, it is, you turn to home remedies. They are passed down like heirlooms: onion syrup, turpentine rubbed on the chest, goose fat layered with a flannel strip. Mustard plasters are popular, slapped onto the skin like spicy regrets, and left until your chest feels like it's being punished for existing. You've tried hot lemon water, though lemons are expensive. More likely it's hot vinegar. Some people swear by honey and whiskey, some just go straight to whiskey. There's always someone nearby with a firm opinion. The neighbour swears by a sock full of salt tucked under your pillow. Your aunt insists you eat nothing but beef broth and keep your feet wrapped in newspaper. Your friend says you need to sweat it out, so now you're lying in bed under 3 quilts and your Sunday coat, cooking in your own misery. Someone else recommends raw garlic. You try it. You smell like a haunted deli. The cold doesn't care. When it gets worse, and it always gets worse before it gets better, you lie in bed and wonder how people survive this every year. Your throat is a scraped tunnel. Your nose runs endlessly, but somehow also blocks up like someone's crammed wax in your head. You ache everywhere. There's a chill behind your eyes that no fire can touch. You can't taste your soup. You wonder briefly if you've already died and just haven't gotten the memo. And while you're curled under your covers, coughing into a rag that used to be white, you remember all the things you were warned about. Pneumonia, consumption, the grip. No one calls it influenza yet, not formally, not the way we understand it today. It's just the illness. The one that sweeps through tenement blocks and leaves cribs empty. The one that clings to the lungs and drags you down, slow and relentless. You hear stories of families with 5 sick children, and only one making it through. You don't let your mind stay there long. Of course, the rich get sick too, but their beds are warmed. Their broth comes in silver bowls. Their doctors arrive in carriages and linger longer, and even have access to new medicines, quinine, morphine, even early versions of aspirin if you're lucky and daring. But the working poor, they have prayers and plasters, and maybe a bit of brandy hidden in the cupboard for when things get really dire. Here's your quirky historical footnote. Some Edwardian mothers would hang a string of cut onions around a child's neck as a protective charm against illness. Not eat them, just wear them. All day, in public, to absorb the sickness, supposedly. You can imagine how popular that child became at school. The scholars are divided on how effective Edwardian medicine actually was in dealing with common winter illnesses. Some point out that access to even basic medical care was still a class privilege, and home remedies, however earnest, couldn't always compete with the diseases of the time. Others note that these communities developed surprisingly effective survival tactics. Early signs of dehydration were managed, diets adjusted, fresh air emphasised and sometimes too much, and herbal knowledge passed on with care. The truth probably lives somewhere in the middle. Eventually your fever breaks, or it doesn't. You lie there shivering, sheets damp with the sweat, mouth dry as chalk. Someone brings you tea. It's lukewarm and tastes like boiled carpet, but you sip it anyway. You breathe through your mouth because your nose is still at war with itself. Your ribs hurt from coughing. Your voice is gone, but your eyes open a little easier, and the light doesn't stab your brain quite as hard. That's how you know you're on the upswing. The recovery is slow. You drag yourself from bed one day and sit in a chair near the fire, swaddled like a baby in shawls and blankets. You eat soft bread. You sip broth. Your face still feels like someone else's. But you're vertical, that counts. You will still cough for weeks. That's the Edwardian after effect. The catarrh sticks around like a guest who can't take a hint, but you made it. And next week, when someone else starts coughing and blowing into a rag at the market, you'll give them a sympathetic nod. Maybe even offer your last onion, because in this world, that's what passes for both medicine and kindness. Not everything about Edwardian winter was misery layered in damp wool and soot. For the upper crust, it was also a season of thrill-seeking wrapped in tweed and fur, a brisk exhalation of cold air in the countryside, and an opportunity to look stylish while doing something mildly dangerous. You, tonight, are wearing your good gloves, perched on the edge of a horse-drawn sleigh in the freezing countryside, pretending not to care that your nose is numb and you can no longer feel your upper lip. This is leisure, darling. Just nod and look picturesque. It starts with the hunt. Fox hunting in winter is not for the weak-stomached or weak-willed. You wake before sunrise, wrap yourself in every tailored layer you own, and join the others for a quick nip of brandy or sherry to steel the nerves. The grounds are blanketed in frost. The horse's breath steams in the dim light. You mount with a grace that masks your inner prayer that you won't slip off and become a cautionary tale. The horns sound, the dogs bark, and the chase is on. If you're actually involved, it's freezing chaos, galloping through frozen fields, ducking branches, and occasionally crashing through slushy ditches. If you're a guest who's just here for the aesthetic, you stay back, smile broadly, and declare how invigorating it all is. By mid-morning you're already soaked with sweat under your layers, but that's fine. So is everyone else. Foxes, on the other hand, are less enthusiastic about the tradition. After the hunt, it's back to the manor for hot soup, a fire roaring in the hearth, and stories that somehow always end with someone falling into a stream. You warm your boots by the grate and sip something rich and warm from a porcelain cup. Cognac, chocolate, possibly both. Your cheeks are pink, your limbs ache in that good way, and you look like something from a Christmas card, if the card came with calluses and mild frostbite. But hunting wasn't the only winter pastime for the Edwardian elite. There was skating, ice skating, that noble and occasionally humiliating pursuit. Lakes and ponds, if frozen thick enough, became impromptu social arenas. You lace up your leather skates with numbed fingers, wobble to your feet, and immediately regret every decision leading to this moment. The first step is always an adventure. The second one is usually closer to a faceplant. Still, once you're moving, there's something euphoric about it. The sound of steel on ice, the echo of laughter across the lake, the way the trees blur past as you build speed. It's almost enough to forget you're basically hurtling along a frozen death trap with shoes that hate you. Couples glide hand in hand, cheeks flushed, scarves flapping behind them. Children crash and scream with joy. Someone brings a gramophone and plays tinny waltzes. A picnic gets set up with thick blankets and slabs of fruitcake that might have been frozen since last year. For the wealthier crowd, winter sports abroad are gaining popularity too. Switzerland is the fashionable destination. Tobogganing down the Cresta Run in St. Moritz becomes a badge of boldness, or lunacy. You hurtle down a twisty ice-packed track, essentially steering with your body weight and blind optimism. Broken bones are common, dignity is rare, but if you manage it without screaming or vomiting, you're basically a celebrity. Back home, you might also try curling, snowshoeing, or winter walks with titles like the Bracing Constitutional. These involve trudging through snow-covered estates with a cane, a pipe, and someone behind you to carry the tea flask. You pause occasionally to remark on the beauty of the frost-covered hedges and secretly check if your toes are still attached. The idea is to act as though you're enjoying every frozen second. Suffering in silence is not only noble, it's fashionable. There's always a return to the manor at the end, wet clothes peeled off in tiled mudrooms, servants waiting with slippers and towels, fires that crackle like applause for your winter gallantry. You change into something dry, wrap yourself in a fur-lined robe, and collapse onto a divan with a sigh that says, "Yes, I am alive, and yes, I did fall in the stream, thank you." Here's your quirky fact for the evening. Fashionable Edwardian women sometimes wore fur-trimmed skating coats that were so long and elaborate they dragged behind them like wedding trains. They'd skate with one arm elegantly raised and the other trailing the coat like a sentient blanket. It looked stunning. It was also wildly impractical. More than one society column recorded a near drowning in ice when a lady's hem caught a crack and sent her skidding into the water like a Victorian swan dive. Of course, leisure like this is reserved for the wealthy. The working class doesn't skate on ponds. They slide along frozen puddles outside factories, laughing as they fall into heaps. They don't hunt foxes, they chase coal carts, hoping to gather the bits that fall off. Their winter sports are improvised, spontaneous and rarely elegant, but they're joyful in their own way. A snowball fight in a narrow alley, a sled made from a flattened coal sack, a dash across an iced-over canal with your mates, hearts pounding, shoes slipping. Scholars still argue about whether these winter leisure pursuits were signs of cultural flourishing or simply a way for the rich to perform status while ignoring the suffering around them. Probably both. The upper class found ways to romanticize the cold, the poor just survived it. But tonight, you're warming your fingers on a mug of hot mulled wine, your legs still shaky from the skating you pretended to be good at. Laughter echoes down the hall, someone sitting at the piano, playing a soft tune. Outside, snow begins to fall again, coating the grounds in fresh, undisturbed white. It's peaceful, even pretty. You know this won't last, the fire will dim, the wind will pick up, and tomorrow the winter will come knocking again. But for now, you curl your feet under the blanket, feel the last sting of cold in your cheeks, and allow yourself this one luxury to be warm and amused for just one Edwardian evening. The thing about Edwardian winters is that they were long, unforgiving stretches of grey and white, days that blurred together under the weight of coal smoke and cold fingers. But then something happened near the end of December. Something bright, something loud, something with a turkey. Christmas for the Edwardians wasn't just a holiday, it was a full-blown seasonal strategy. A ritualized warmth bomb dropped smack in the middle of an otherwise soul-numbing winter. And for one brief glittering stretch of days, you weren't just surviving, you were celebrating. It begins at the hearth, where pine branches, dragged in from the frozen woods, are arranged with all the enthusiasm of a pagan who's just discovered interior design. Ivy snakes across the mantel, berries pop like bits of accidental colour, and oranges, real, juicy, impossible oranges, are placed in bowls like trophies. You've been hoarding them for weeks. They cost more than they're worth, but nothing says we're pretending this winter is magical, quite like citrus in the snow. Even the poor make an effort. You string cranberries or scraps of red cloth. You light more candles, cheap wax stubs that spit and hiss, but still offer a golden glow. Children draw holly leaves on scraps of newspaper. The soot on the walls seems to retreat for a few days, or at least you stop noticing it. Everything smells like cloves, potatoes, and damp wool. And yet somehow that combination is comforting. If you've got a bit of money, there's a Christmas goose in your future. If you're really lucky, maybe even a turkey, an imported American fad that's working its way onto British tables with stubborn ambition. You baste it with drippings, stuff it with chestnuts or onions, and cook it over the hearth, turning it slowly by hand or on a spit. The whole house fills with its scent, the kind of smell that lingers in your clothes for days like a warm, savoury ghost. Puddings are made weeks in advance, dense, dark things filled with dried fruit, booze, and possibly hope. You wrap them in muslin, tie them with string, and hang them near the ceiling beams like culinary wind chimes. Come Christmas Day, you steam them for hours until they tremble like nervous jelly. Then you douse them in brandy and set them on fire. The flames rise blue and glorious. Everyone claps. You cough a little on the smoke and smile anyway, but the food is just part of it. The real power of Christmas lies in its distractions. Parlour games, card tricks, impromptu plays performed by children in ill-fitting paper crowns. You pull crackers and read the jokes out loud, even though they're terrible. Especially because they're terrible. Everyone laughs too loudly. It's the sound of people forcing joy through chattering teeth. Music swells through the house. Carols, if someone can play the piano. Off-key singing, if they can't. In cities, carolers appear at the door, cheeks flushed, lanterns flickering. You give them a coin or a biscuit, or maybe just a smile, and a moment of not being alone. In the countryside, you might walk to church through frost-covered hedgerows, each breath rising in silver curls as the bell tolls in the distance. Inside, the church is cold, but you feel warmer just being there, surrounded by neighbours and the low hum of togetherness. Here's your quirky holiday detail. The Edwardians had a thing for dead birds. Not just cooked ones, taxidermy, decorative, festive. You could buy Christmas cards adorned with lovingly sketched robins lying motionless in snow. It was supposed to be poetic. Peaceful. Probably symbolic of something. Nothing says happy holidays like a frozen sparrow staring into the void. And then there are the gifts. Handmade mostly. A knitted scarf, a new apron, a set of carved buttons or a simple wooden toy. Children's eyes light up at a doll made from scraps, a tin whistle, or a book with their name scribbled inside. Wrapping paper isn't common. Things are bundled in cloth or newspaper tied with string. You open them slowly, savouring the crinkle and the weight, pretending you didn't know exactly what was inside. The act of giving matters more than the object. Warmth through ritual, through thought. The rich, of course, go bigger. Silver trinkets, perfumed soaps, imported chocolates, new gloves. They're trees, yes, real Christmas trees, sparkle with glass baubles, candles, which sometimes burn down the curtains, and long tinsel threads that shimmer like frost. Servants bustle with trays and wine bottles. Everything smells like cedar and butter. And beneath all that polish, the same need. For light, for laughter, for something to believe in until spring returns. Even the workhouses, infamous for their harshness, recognise the power of Christmas. Meals were upgraded just for the day. A bit of meat, a sweet, maybe a song. It wasn't much, but it was something. The illusion of cheer, tightly packed into an institution not known for joy. And yet, for those few hours, even the most threadbare lives glimmered with the ghost of celebration. The scholars argue over the meaning of Edwardian Christmas. Was it an escape hatch from winter's miseries, or a calculated attempt to civilise the cold through food and tradition? Was it driven by genuine warmth or performative cheer? Did the rituals unify or just paper over the cracks? The answer is probably yes. to all of it. Because you're sitting here now, breath warming your teacup, your fingers still tingling from pulling a cracker with your little sister. The parlour smells like oranges and melting wax. There's laughter in the next room. The fire crackles behind you, and someone hands you a slice of plum cake so dense it could stop a bullet. You bite into it, sweet and bitter and sticky, and for a moment, just a flicker, winter isn't cruel. It's cosy. You'll be cold again tomorrow. The coal will run low, the wind will return, but for now, for tonight, you're wrapped in something more powerful than blankets. Tradition, absurdity, family. All the things that tell the dark you can wait. And it does. The Thames hasn't frozen solid in years by the time you're living in Edwardian London, but people still talk about the frost fairs like they happened just last winter. Older folks recall them with the sort of dazed fondness usually reserved for miracle sightings or near-death experiences. You could buy roast beef right there on the ice, someone says. Had a puppet show too and a gambling table. Real dice, right on the river. You nod politely, though you've never seen the Thames do anything other than churn cold and grey beneath its bridges, dirty and impatient as the rest of the city. But long before the trains and the factories and the soot that warms the air just enough to keep the river moving, the Thames did freeze, not every year, but enough times that it left a mark. During the so-called Little Ice Age, winters were cold enough to turn the wide tidal river into a massive sheet of ice. Londoners didn't just admire it, they claimed it. They set up shops, they printed newspapers, they roasted whole oxen and danced reels and got wonderfully drunk on makeshift tavern planks laid across the frozen current. One year someone even walked an elephant across it, just because they could. Of course, by your time, the frost fairs are gone, choked off by warming temperatures, better urban drainage, and the new embankments that narrow the river and quicken its flow. The memory lingers. The idea that once, not that long ago, people turned disaster into spectacle. They stood on the ice not with fear but with flair. You walk along the riverbank, the fog curling low over the water, and you imagine the scene, booths rattling in the wind and laughter echoing, the occasional ominous crack beneath the table leg. The last real frost fair happened in 1814. That's almost 100 years ago now. The river's changed, London's changed, but the nostalgia is stubborn. People still print postcards of painted scenes, women in bonnets buying hot chestnuts from vendors on ice, boys sliding on sleds past a preacher ranting about sin, couples skating with handkerchiefs tied between their wrists like some Victorian trust exercise. They look absurd and magical. You want it to be true, and maybe, in the right light, it still is. Because even if the Thames doesn't freeze over anymore, the winter still brings that same hunger, for novelty, for spectacle, for defying the cold with something other than silence. So instead of a frozen river fair, you get winter markets, rows of stalls crammed into city squares, selling roasted nuts and boiled sweets, wool mittens and dubious candied apples. There are fiddlers and fortune-tellers, a man with a dancing bear, a small brass band in questionable uniforms. It's all a bit crowded and a bit chaotic, but the spirit's the same. If you can't make the cold go away, you might as well throw a party in its honour. There's a fringe society too, one you've only just heard about, called the Ice Club. A peculiar collection of men who every winter row out to a semi-frozen pond somewhere in the countryside, strip down to their underthings and jump in. They claim it invigorates the body and strengthens the mind. You suspect it mostly strengthens their ability to lie about how fun it was, but they carry the same torch in a way, this proud tradition of telling winter it can't have the last word. And so, in the absence of real frost fairs, people recreate them in small ways. Someone hosts a skating party on the pond in Regent's Park, complete with paper lanterns, and a man selling mulled wine from a cart that definitely violates a few safety codes. Children run races on the ice while nervous parents yell advice that sounds less like encouragement and more like legal disclaimers. A fiddler plays a quick jig. You watch the whole scene, your hands curled around a steaming cup of weak cider, and you feel it again, that strange, ridiculous warmth born of shared discomfort. It's hard not to feel wistful. You imagine what it must have been like to stand in the middle of the Thames, surrounded by fire pits and fortune-tellers, knowing you're walking on something that should be moving beneath you, that you're part of a moment so absurd and temporary that it only exists in stories now, and not even consistent stories. One scholar insists the ice was never that thick, that the frost fairs were small, poorly attended, and constantly falling into chaos. Another claims they were lively, sprawling spectacles that the city simply outgrew. The truth is buried somewhere in the slush between nostalgia and fact. Still, you get echoes. The city hasn't forgotten how to gather when it's cold. At Christmas time, whole streets string up lights. Carolers stand in shop doorways. Someone builds an ice rink in the shadow of a cathedral. Vendors roast chestnuts and call out prices in voices worn thin by the cold. It's not the Thames, but it's something. Back at home, people share the stories like family legends. Your grandfather bought a watch at a frost fair, someone says, passing around a cracked silver timepiece that is probably from a stall in Islington, not from the middle of a frozen river. You nod. You admire it, because the truth doesn't matter as much as the effort to remember. It's how you survive winter sometimes, not with more blankets, but with better stories. There's another tale, one you overhear from an old printer, about a couple who got married on the ice during the 1683 fair. They signed a marriage licence printed on the river itself, with letters pressed into thick paper by a portable printing presser set up in a tent beside the ox roast. The couple's names are lost now, but the page supposedly still exists somewhere. It's yellowed, ink-smudged, edges curled. Proof that even the coldest days can host the warmest beginnings. You take that story home with you. The Thames, the frost, the ghost of laughter echoing over ice. You sit by the fire, feet thawing, and picture the glow of lanterns flickering across a frozen current. You'll never walk on that river. But the memory of those who did feels oddly close, as though any minute now you'll wake up to snow so thick, so stubborn it freezes time itself. And if it does, you'll be ready. You've got your boots, you've got your scarf, and somewhere in the cupboard, you've got a pack of playing cards just in case the ice decides to throw a fair again. By the time February rolls around, you've got a soot street calendar, frostbitten knuckles, and exactly one thing on your mind. Coal. Not tea, not pudding, not a week-old newspaper pressed against the cracks in the window, but the sweet black treasure that keeps your fire burning, your porridge bubbling, and your sanity marginally intact. In Edwardian winter, coal is everything. It's heat, it's life, and when the supply gets low, which it will, you start to understand just how close to the edge you're living. You don't think about it in summer. Then coal is just background noise, the thing that makes the trains run and blackens the laundry. But in winter it becomes currency. You budget it by the shovel. You hoard it in the scuttle. You glance at the dwindling pile in the corner of the cellar like it's a time bomb. And when the coal man is late, or worse, when there's a shortage, the panic sets in fast. It begins subtly. The coal delivery's smaller than usual, or the price has gone up a halfpenny per sack. Not much, but enough to ruin your week. You hear whispers in the street. The mines are behind, the trains are frozen. Someone went on strike. You try not to listen, but the knot in your stomach gets tighter each day, the coal pile shrinks, and the wind howls louder through the broken sash window. Then comes the rationing. You start making decisions you didn't sign up for. Only the parlour fire gets lit. Kitchen. You bank the coals deeper at night, burying the embers in ash and whispering small apologies to your feet. Hot water bottles become hot brick bottles. You stop drying your clothes and start wearing them damp. You light candles instead of gas lamps. And all the while, your fire gives less heat, like it knows you're bluffing. The poorer families, those without even the scuttles, begin burning whatever they can find. Old shoes, broken furniture, newspaper bricks made from soggy pulp pressed in the back alley. You pass a tenement block and smell the acrid burn of painted wood. It's survival, not hygiene. You can almost see the flames flickering through the cracks in the window frames. If it catches fire, the whole block goes. But until then, it's warm. The coal yards become war zones. Delivery men bicker with desperate buyers. Children crowd the carts, trying to scoop up fallen pieces, while the coal porter's back is turned. You once saw a fight break out between two women over a dropped lump. One grabbed it, the other whacked her with a handbag full of pennies. Neither backed down. That's how you know coal's running low. Decorum goes first. In the wealthier neighbourhoods, things get tense too, but quieter. The lady of the house writes urgent notes to her supplier, wondering why her drawing room fire is so thin lately. The cook says the stove isn't keeping heat long enough to bake. The master calls in the butler and asks ever so gently why the billiards room is freezing. Someone suggests cutting the servant's fire, and that's how it starts. Here's your odd fact of the day. In some towns, when coal shortages got really bad, people began issuing fuel tokens, essentially ration chips you could exchange for a small amount of coal, regulated by the parish or local council. They weren't worth anything except heat, and in winter, that made them more valuable than gold. In London, rumours swirl of coal thefts, entire wagon loads going missing. You hear of a boy who slipped into a storage yard and filled his cap with dust and crumbs from the bottom of the pile. He got caught. His mother cried in court. The judge let him off with a warning and a quiet donation to the family. Not every story ends that way. There's an ongoing debate among social historians about how coal scarcity reshaped winter class dynamics during the Edwardian era. Some argue it brought rich and poor into the same cold reality, everyone cold, everyone desperate. Others insist it only highlighted the divide. The rich used less coal but had more options, more layers, and bigger homes to hide from the cold and endure. The poor just shivered harder. The data's murky. The frostbite is not. You start making adjustments. You only boil water once and keep it in a kettle under a thick tea cosy. You stop washing linen so often. You share a room with siblings you'd rather strangle just to conserve body heat. You eat things cold rather than waste a match. And when you do light the fire, you sit as close as you can, knees to grate, nose nearly singed. You learn to warm your socks on the fender rail and not let them drop into the ashes. Twice burned is enough. One day, the coal man doesn't show up. The street goes quiet. Neighbours watch the corner like it's the scene of a crime. Children are sent out to scout, bundled like overstuffed luggage, peering around alleyways for the sound of iron wheels. Nothing. The day drags on. No fire gets lit. You eat a cold supper. You crawl into bed early, blankets doubled, breath fogging above your face. The silence of an unlit house is a particular kind of cold. The next morning a new delivery arrives, smaller and sootier than usual. The bags are lighter, the price higher, and the coal itself, dusty, crumbly, not much burn in it. But no one complains. Everyone grabs what they can. You pay, you haul, you burn. And the first crackle of fire in the hearth is so sweet you could cry. The whole house smells like smoke and hope. For now, it's enough. Tomorrow, maybe not. The wind is already picking up again, sharp and unforgiving. But your hands are warm, your tea steams. You hold your palms over the flame, soaking in the brief glow like a thief stealing light. Because in an Edwardian winter, fuel isn't just warmth, it's power. And sometimes power comes one coal lump at a time. You look in the mirror, what little of yourself you can make out through the foggy glass, and sigh. The reflection staring back is a bundle of layers, lace, wool, and questionable choices. The hat's too tight, the corset digs at your ribs, and your boots are already damp from this morning's slush. But what else can you do? In Edwardian winter, staying fashionable is a dangerous game. Every outfit is a gamble between warmth and dignity, between social status and actually feeling your toes. And today, like every other cold day this season, you're pushing the limits. Let's start with the women. If you're of a certain class, which is to say, you're not sweeping coal dust from behind a bakery, you're expected to maintain a certain silhouette no matter the weather. That means corsets, petticoats, skirts that brush the ground and drink up every filthy splash of London's grey puddles. Over all that goes a coat. Not a parka, not a waterproof masterpiece of modern technology. No, a long woolen number lined with fur if you're lucky, and trimmed with buttons that take you 15 minutes to fasten with frozen fingers. And then there's the hat. It's never optional and it must match the coat, of course, and it must be pinned securely to your meticulously styled hair. If the wind tears it off and you're seen chasing it across Trafalgar Square like a madwoman, social death. You pin it down with a vengeance and walk into the storm as if you're not being whipped in the eyes by rogue feathers and your own veil. Muffs are in fashion, those cylindrical hand warmers made of fur or velvet. You slide your hands in and exhale relief, only to remember you're meant to carry a parasol or handbag as well, because somehow society believes you have a third arm. Gloves, if worn, must be dainty, not useful. Definitely not the woolly kind the maid uses to scrub the floor. Men, meanwhile, have their own misery to contend with. Wool trousers that stiffen in the cold, shirts with detachable collars starched to a level of cruelty and fastened with tiny buttons engineered to destroy fingernails. Then there's the waistcoat, the overcoat, the scarf, and the hat. Always the hat. A bowler or top hat depending on the occasion, each one designed to trap heat just long enough to make your forehead sweat in the one place you can't adjust in public. And let's not forget the shoes. Footwear in Edwardian winter is less about comfort and more about making a statement. Boots with narrow toes, barely lined, and often polished within an inch of their lives. They slip on ice, they leak, they crush your toes into neat little wedges, but they look good. And looking good, especially if you're part of the middle or upper class, is almost more important than staying warm. In fact, warmth often looks like weakness. There's an unspoken rule that suffering gracefully is a kind of refinement. Only the lower classes need to pile on too many layers. If you must wear something practical, it must be disguised. Quilted linings sewn into coats, long underwear hidden beneath lace. Even wool stockings come with embroidered tops to make them feel less agricultural. Here's your slightly bizarre fringe fact. There was a brief Edwardian craze for fur-lined underwear. Yes, really, especially among those travelling abroad or into the countryside during the harshest months. It was advertised as elegant warmth, and often made from rabbit or lamb fleece, stitched into drawers and camisoles. Of course, it was expensive, itchy, and made you sweat like a roast, but it was exclusive and therefore desirable. Children's fashion wasn't much better. Little girls were expected to be miniature versions of their mothers. Layered petticoats, buttoned boots, hats with ribbons that choked them in high wind. Boys wore short pants and high socks even in January, their knobby knees turning purple while adults claimed the cold would toughen them up. Sometimes mothers wrapped extra layers around them before letting them outside, only to be scolded later by a governess or neighbour for spoiling them. Strength through hypothermia, apparently. But while fashion was rigid, people found loopholes. Working-class women often wore men's long underwear beneath their skirts. Shopgirls stitched old shawls into hidden petticoats. Street vendors tied sacking around their waists beneath aprons. And in the privacy of the kitchen or scullery, you wore what you could get away with. Patched sweaters, mismatched socks, layers of wool that smelled faintly of stew and smoke. There's scholarly debate about how much winter fashion truly influenced health outcomes. Some suggest that tight clothing and poor layering contributed to respiratory issues and circulation problems. Others argue that the strict etiquette around clothing simply made people inventive. They may have appeared proper, but underneath those starched collars and feathered hats was a whole ecosystem of thermal adaptation. Still, there were real risks. Skirts could freeze stiff in the snow. Wet hems dragged filth and disease straight into homes. Too tight boots led to blisters that, in the absence of decent antibiotics, sometimes festered into something much worse. And corsets, worn too long in the cold, restricted breathing at a time when your lungs were already working overtime just to fight off bronchitis. And yet, despite all of it, fashion didn't pause for winter. In fact, for the social elite, the cold became a kind of runway. You debuted your new coat at the theatre. You showed off your ice skating ensemble at Hyde Park. You flaunted your velvet gloves while sipping hot cocoa at the hotel lounge. If you had money, winter was just another opportunity to prove it. Back at home, though, the moment the door shut behind you, the layers came flying off. The hat hit the hook. The boots were kicked toward the fire. Corsets loosened. Petticoats were swapped for patched flannel wrappers. A cup of tea, a pair of thick socks, and a stolen 10 minutes by the hearth. That was the real luxury. Because beneath the stiff collars and dramatic muffs, every Edwardian was just trying not to freeze. The silk may have been lined, the lace may have been starched, but cold doesn't care how fashionable you are. It cuts through everything the same way. Quiet, sharp, and entirely unimpressed. So tomorrow you'll lace up the boots again, button the coat, pin the hat, step out into the freezing street looking like you're on your way to a society gala instead of a grocer's queue. And you'll do it all with a stiff upper lip and frozen fingers, because style after all is eternal, even if your toes are not. You don't need much to stay warm in an Edwardian winter, just creativity, determination, and a healthy disregard for fire safety. With fuel in short supply and most houses built more for draft than defence, insulation becomes a full-time job. You walk through your front door every day like you're stepping onto a battlefield. The enemy? Cold air. And it's already inside, lurking in every corner, seeping through keyholes, creeping up through the floorboards. But you're ready. Kind of. First rule of Edwardian home insulation: plug everything. You begin with the windows. The panes are thin, single-glazed, and mostly ornamental when it comes to heat retention. The cold presses against them like a beggar at the door. Condensation forms on the inside, then freezes into lace-like patterns so pretty they almost make you forget that your room is trying to kill you. You stuff rags and newspapers into the gaps around the sashes. Old socks work too. Some families use clay or wax to fill the cracks, but you're not made of money, so you go for the tried and true method, shove something in and pray. Then there are the curtains, not the nice decorative ones that match your wallpaper. No, you need thick ones, layers of wool, heavy velvet, or even re-sewn blankets. You pull them shut as soon as the sun starts to set, which in winter is basically late afternoon. Some people hang curtains across doorways too, transforming hallways into impromptu insulation chambers. It's not elegant, but it's effective. And if anyone questions it, you say it's continental and keep walking. Next, the floor. If you're lucky, you've got carpets, and not just decorative ones in the parlour. Working class families lay down straw beneath rugs to keep out the rising cold from the ground below. You sweep it up and replace it every few weeks before it moulds or plays host to a few too many fleas. If there's no rug, you throw down anything you can find. Old coats, sacking, piles of newspapers. Every layer matters. You're not decorating, you're building thermal armour. And don't forget the door. Wind sneaks in like a gossip. So you roll up a heavy cloth, known affectionately as a door sausage, and place it along the threshold. The goal is simple. Make every entrance feel like a border checkpoint. Cold air, you are not welcome here. Now here's a quirky little method from the era. Some families nailed linoleum or oilcloth to the inside walls to keep the cold from radiating inward. It looked awful, bubbled in damp corners, and smelled faintly of chemicals. But it worked, sort of. It was like giving your house a second skin, one that hissed and crinkled every time you leaned against it. Upstairs, you do your best. Bedrooms are always colder, but you've got tricks. Some people hang fabric panels along the walls like makeshift tapestries. Others paste layers of newspaper under the wallpaper. One of those solutions that's brilliant in theory but a fire hazard in practice. Still, you've got a cousin who swears it helped her get through a particularly brutal winter with only 2 chilblains and 1 mild case of wallpaper poisoning. You also get creative with bedding. Under the mattress, more newspapers. Between the sheets, a brick wrapped in flannel and still warm from the hearth. You sleep in your clothes, your coat, and occasionally your boots. If you wake in the night and can't feel your face, that's just part of the charm. There's debate among modern historians about how effective these measures truly were. Some argue that Edwardian insulation was barely better than wishful thinking, that homes were glorified refrigerators with prettier wallpaper. Others suggest that people developed an intuitive understanding of microclimates within their homes. Heat retention strategies that weren't scientific but absolutely practical. When you live in a house built to leak, you become very good at plugging holes. And the Edwardians weren't entirely behind on innovation. Some middle-class homes had cork panelling, expensive but effective. Others experimented with internal shutters, wooden panels fitted into the windows at night to trap heat. The truly wealthy installed secondary glass panes or had custom-made felt strips added to their doors. But for most people, it was rags, rugs, and resourcefulness. Of course, insulation wasn't just about materials, it was about habits. You kept rooms shut off unless absolutely necessary. You didn't linger near outer walls, you moved constantly, sewing, sweeping, stirring pots, anything to generate heat. You shared beds or you shared chairs. Entire families would crowd into the one warm room in the house like moths around a candle, pretending they didn't mind the lack of personal space. Survival isn't dignified, it's collaborative. And yet, in all this discomfort, there's something oddly tender. The way your father checks the curtains before bed like a sentry. The way your mother folds extra newspaper into the lining of your boots. The way your siblings argue over who gets the warmer corner of the bed but always end up curled together like puppies. You learn to spot leaks in a room not by drafts, but by instinct. You know which floorboard to avoid because it's always colder. You develop a sixth sense for where the warm air goes and how to trap it like a creature in a cage. You once saw a friend's home with painted floor cloths, layers of fabric treated with linseed oil and pigment, laid like rolled-dyed rugs over bare boards. They were beautiful, geometric, and stiff as cardboard. You asked if it kept the room warmer. He just shrugged and said it made his mother feel better. Sometimes that's enough. So you end your day wrapped in all your tricks, feet on a rug that's 3 newspapers thick, knees under a quilt you patched for the 4th time last week. The wind still howls at the door, but it stays out for now. The walls still leak cold, but slower than before. You sip weak tea, fingers curled around the mug, and watch the shadows dance across your makeshift fortress. Insulation in Edwardian winter isn't efficient. It's not sleek. It's not even particularly clean. But it works, in the way that humans have always made things work. A little bit of knowledge, a little bit of desperation, and a whole lot of layered wool. City cold and country cold are not the same beast. In the city, winter is all soot and damp. It clings to you like an unpaid debt. A slow, grinding discomfort made worse by the fact that you're surrounded by people pretending not to feel it. But out in the country, the cold is different. Sharper, cleaner, almost majestic in its cruelty. There's a silence to it, a stillness, and it cuts through everything, including whatever lingering romantic ideas you had about thatched cottages and pastoral serenity. You wake up in a farmhouse near the edge of a forgotten village, the kind where the road turns to mud before it even reaches your front gate. The air inside your room is cold enough to see your breath. The frost has crept across the inside of the window, making lace patterns prettier than anything you'll ever own. The chamber pot is frozen. The basin water has a skin on it. The candle you forgot to snuff out still leans over in a pool of hardened wax, like it gave up halfway through the night. Downstairs, the fire has gone out. No banked embers, no gentle glow, just grey ash and the faint smell of last night's soup. You pull on your woolen socks, still damp from yesterday's snow, and trudge out to fetch kindling with your boots unlaced, because your fingers are too stiff to tie them. The yard is quiet. The fields are white. The trees are skeletal shadows against a sky that's all promise and no warmth. You chop wood with the dull axe. The handle is cracked, and the blade skips more than it bites. You breathe steam. Your arms burn. You are briefly not cold. Then you stop moving and feel it again, the cold wrapping back around you like a punishment. In the city you can at least chase heat. Public rooms, a baker's shop, the warmth of other bodies on the omnibus. In the countryside there's nothing. Just fields and hedges and the long, low whistle of wind through stone walls. Heat isn't just rare, it's self-made. You light the fire, you boil the kettle, you feed the animals before you feed yourself because their silence is heavier than yours. Now let's say you're a tenant farmer. Your cottage is one room with a lean-to tacked on like an afterthought. The roof leaks, the wind comes in under the door. You've stuffed the cracks with straw and wool, but the chill still finds you. The chimney smokes wrong if the wind's from the east. Your boots have holes and the soles flap when you walk. There's no choice but to keep walking. You go out to break the ice on the water trough for the cows. You haul hay with fingers that don't feel like yours anymore. You open the hen house and find 2 eggs, one already cracked from the cold. The rooster glares at you like it's your fault the sun hasn't warmed the earth yet. You wonder how people survive entire seasons of this. Then you remember, some don't. Now here's a twist of irony. Many city dwellers romanticized the country in winter. They wrote poems about snow-covered meadows and rustic charm. They imagined quiet lanes with smoke curling from chimneys and warm bread cooling on windowsills. That's because they didn't have to defrost a turnip in a bucket of cold water just to make supper. But there's a different kind of resilience here too. Rural folk are used to handling things themselves. You make your own bread, your own clothes, your own soap. When the wind blows the barn door off its hinges, you grab a hammer and fix it. When the roof leaks, you patch it with whatever's handy. There's no one to call, no landlord who'll listen, just you and the cold locked in a very long argument. And yet, in some ways, the countryside offers an edge. There's more fuel, trees, hedges, old fences if it gets desperate. You can gather sticks, cut down dead limbs, burn peat if you live in the right part of the country. In the city you pay for every scrap of heat. In the country you earn it with your back and your time. There's also more space. In the city you might share a room with 6 people and a rat named Harold. Out here it's just you, your family, and the frost-etched horizon. It's isolating, yes, but it's also quieter. No cold smoke turning the snow black. No alleyway winds filled with soot and shouting. Just a stillness that seeps into your bones along with the cold. Scholars have argued for years about who had it worse in winter. City dwellers or country folk. City people had overcrowding, pollution, and higher disease risk, but better access to supplies and doctors. Country families had cleaner air and more space, but less infrastructure and fewer options when things went wrong. No corner shop, no public bath, no neighbour with an extra loaf, just the sky and the field and your own ingenuity. Still, you find little comforts, the warmth of a cow's flank when you lean into milk, the way the fire finally catches after 20 minutes of coaxing, the smell of turnip stew bubbling in the pot. You wrap your hands around the chipped mug and sip slowly, knowing there's nothing else coming. This is it. But it's warm, and that's enough. There's a blanket hanging over the door, held in place by 2 nails and wishful thinking. Your daughter stitched it from scraps. The dog sleeps by the hearth, curled tight, ears twitching. You look out the window. The snow's falling again, slow and steady, settling on the hedge like icing sugar. It's beautiful in a brutal kind of way. You sit down with your bowl of stew and your cracked spoon, pull your chair close to the fire, and stretch your legs toward the warmth. The flames pop, throwing shadows against the wall. Outside the cold waits. It always does, but for now you've held it off. Another night survived, and in the country that's the win. The cold does strange things to people's brains. By the time you've survived half an Edwardian winter, your body is on autopilot, your limbs stiff, your lips cracked, and your toes a roulette wheel of numbness or searing pain. You've tried coal, you've tried extra blankets, you've even tried whispering gentle threats at your fireplace, but now you reach for the last bastion of survival, superstition. Remedies passed down from grandmothers who probably made them up just to feel in control of something. Onion in your socks, mustard on your chest, brandy in everything. You wake with a sore throat and a sense of impending doom. It's that tickle, that warning bell in the back of your mouth that says, yes, actually, you might die this week. You pull on a tattered scarf and reach for the tin of goose grease. It smells like regret and desperation. You smear it across your chest and wrap yourself in a flannel cloth because someone once swore by it, and frankly nothing else is working. Then comes the onion. Not chopped, not cooked. Whole, peeled and slightly bruised, tucked into your woolen socks before bed like you're trying to marinate yourself overnight. You lie there in the dark, stinking slightly of kitchen scraps, and try to remember if this is supposed to draw out the fever or just make you smell so bad the illness leaves on its own. And mustard plasters. Ah yes, the fire blankets of the desperate. You grind mustard seeds, mix with water to a paste to smear it onto a rag, then slap it on your chest and wait for the burn. It starts like a tingle, then a sting, then a full-on inferno under your shirt while your family debates whether you've invented the first portable stove. It's working, someone says. That means it's helping. Sure, that's definitely science. There's the salt socks too. Warmed in a pan and tied off, it's placed around your neck or on your stomach. It's supposed to draw out humours. Which humours? No one knows, possibly all of them. By this point, you're not even sure you know what a humour is, but the warmth is real, and that's good enough. You chew raw garlic until your breath can melt icicles. You sip vinegar in hot water while pretending it's tea. You hold your face over a bowl of steaming water, a towel over your head, and inhale like you're trying to summon the spirits of your sinuses. Sometimes someone adds eucalyptus oil, sometimes it's just old herbs and a wish. Then there are the charms. Dried rosemary tied with string and hung above the door. Cloves pressed into oranges and rolled across the windowsill. Blue glass beads worn against the skin. A coin placed under the pillow, head side up, to draw away the fever. You think maybe the fever is just curious what else you'll try. Children get the worst of it. Their socks are layered with cayenne and pepper to stimulate circulation. Their throats are rubbed with goose fat and wrapped in wool until they can barely speak. A dab of honey and ginger is pushed into their mouths on a chipped spoon, and they're told to stop complaining and be grateful someone loves them enough to treat them like a glazed ham. Still, some of these ideas aren't entirely nonsense. Many Edwardians swore by hot drinks with lemon and honey, not because they cured anything, but because they soothed. A poultice of boiled linseed or oatmeal really did help draw out infection in wounds. And a hot water bottle tucked under your feet at night. That wasn't superstition, that was survival. But this was a time before antibiotics, before chest infections were just annoying. If you coughed long enough, someone would start to look worried. If you coughed blood, someone would call the doctor. If the doctor used the word consumption, people started whispering behind their gloves. That's why superstition filled the cracks, because the fear was real, and medicine could only do so much. And there were deeper beliefs, older ones that lingered. People hung horseshoes over their doors, not for luck, but to keep out the cold spirits. They placed bowls of water by the hearth to trap evil. They covered mirrors during snowstorms so ghosts couldn't get stuck. You laugh at some of it, sure, but when the wind moans at midnight and the fire goes out unexpectedly, you do glance at the mirror, just to check. The folklore of winter is rich and strange. Stories of frost spirits who sneak in through open windows, of witches who bring snow by shaking out their feather beds, of children who wander too far and never come back, their cries echoing in the wind. You tell these tales by candlelight, wrapped in quilts, pretending not to shiver. Even the food gets ritualized. On the first day of real snow, you make a pie and cross the crust with a knife to ward off illness. You leave a spoonful of stew on the windowsill for the wandering cold. You stir your porridge clockwise to bring warmth to the house. You know it's ridiculous, but you still do it. There's debate among scholars about whether these remedies were acts of ignorance or acts of empowerment. Some argue that Edwardian folk medicine held people back, kept them from seeking real help. Others say it gave families something to do when help didn't come. In a world where the doctor was far away and probably unaffordable, These rituals were a way of saying we're not giving up. And that's the real heart of it. These salves, these charms, these ridiculous routines, they aren't about saying, science. They're about hope, about routine, about control in a season that feels like it's trying to dismantle you one frostbitten toe at a time. When you place that onion in your sock or light that candle in the window, you're sending a message, not to the illness, to yourself. You're still fighting. So tonight, you climb into bed, chest stinging from mustard, throat numb from vinegar, breath reeking of garlic. You've got 3 socks on each foot and one on your left hand because it felt funny. The window is shut, the mirror's covered, the fire is low but alive. You are still here, still warm, still weird, and winter hasn't won yet. You don't expect romance in the dead of winter. Not when your nose is raw from windburn and your breath smells like onion socks and mustard poultices. Not when you're swaddled in so many layers that your arms stick out at awkward angles and your knees refuse to bend properly. And yet, here you are, sharing a slow smile with someone over a steaming mug of tea in a firelit room that's barely above freezing, wondering if you're in love or just mildly hypothermic. Edwardian courtship in winter doesn't come with moonlit strolls or long walks through flower gardens. It comes with shared scarves, slipping on ice in front of someone you're trying to impress, and scribbling love notes with fingers so cold they might snap off mid-sentence. If summer romances are all breath or all breathless glances and parasols, winter ones are a study in strategic proximity. It's not about butterflies in your stomach, it's about how closely you can sit without being scandalous and still catching some of the fire's heat. You lean in, just a little, she leans too, the tea between you steams quietly. Conversation drifts toward how hard it was to get fresh eggs this week, and the horror of chilblains. It's not poetic, it's not sweeping. But it's intimate in that everyday, real-life kind of way that actually matters. You glance at the fire. It's a few embers and a stubborn flicker now. You can still see your breath. You don't care. Sometimes love letters come into play. Carefully written on the thick paper, sealed with wax, delivered by gloved hand, or tucked discreetly into the fold of a book. The ink smudges if it's too cold when you write. Your fingers tremble as you scratch out words you hope don't sound idiotic. You imagine her reading it beside her own hearth, cheeks pink from the cold, eyes scanning your slightly awkward but well-meant phrases. You wonder if she'll write back. You hope she will. And when she does, if she does, it's always something short and quiet. A note slipped into your coat pocket. A tiny paper flower pressed between pages. A line of verse from Tennyson, with your name beside it in pencil. No grand declarations, just shared warmth. Winter forces a different kind of closeness. There's no room for pomp. It's too cold for pretense. Instead, it's moments, the way he pours the tea before serving himself, or how she knits a scarf in your colours without ever saying why. It's watching them brush snow off your shoulders with one gloved hand. It's standing beside each other, at church while your boots drip meltwater into the stone floor, and pretending you're not both praying for a seat near the stove. For married couples, winter is both a test and a balm. You sleep back to back beneath layers of patchwork, not from distance but from strategy. Turning over is a shared event. Whoever moves first has to brace against the chill that slips in beneath the quilt. You learn to share hot bricks, hot water bottles, and the space around the fire with a kind of grace that only cold can teach. And yes, sometimes romance is just pure survival. A working couple in a one-room flat shares everything, the bed, the coat, the final slice of bread. They pass each other the last drop of tea, knowing there won't be more until payday. There's no candlelit dinner, just the way he saves the warmer sock for her, the way she doesn't complain when his cough keeps her up. That too is love, not fancy, but real. Now here's your oddball romantic tidbit. Edwardians believed that giving a lock of hair was a deeply intimate gesture. It was often braided into a bracelet or tucked inside a locket worn close to the heart. But in winter, hair was also practical. It could be used to line gloves, mittens, even muff warmers. So yes, some people literally stayed warm by snuggling bits of their beloved inside their clothing. Is that sweet or horrifying? Let's go with both. There's a deeper charm to all of this. When you're cold and tired and unsure whether your next coal delivery will arrive on time, it's the small, warm things that matter most. A shared chair beside the fire, reading aloud by lamplight with your knees touching, the soft rustle of someone folding your shawl and placing it beside your coat, not because they have to, but because they noticed. You meet at market, hands brushing over turnips. You walk home together under one umbrella, which isn't really wide enough for two, so your shoulders stay damp. You don't mind. You say goodbye with a smile and a soft promise to share soup sometime soon. That's romance. That's courtship. That's the Edwardian winter love story. Not grand gestures, but small ones repeated over time, warming your heart just enough to keep going. Scholars sometimes underestimate the emotional texture of this era. There's a tendency to reduce relationships to transactions, to class alliances, to etiquette. And while those things matter, especially for the upper classes, there's also plenty of evidence of tenderness. Preserved letters, shared photographs, pressed flowers found in family Bibles. Human beings always find ways to reach for each other, especially when the cold sets in. Tonight, you pull out a letter she sent you last week. You read it again, even though you've already memorized the words. You hold it close to the fire, just enough to warm the paper, not scorch it. Her handwriting is neat, looped, deliberate. There's a smudge where her glove must have brushed the ink. You smile. Outside, the wind is rising again. The frost curls around the windows, trying to peek in, but your fingers are warm. Your chest is full of something softer than steam, steadier than heat. And somewhere across town, she's probably reading your last letter too, wrapped in a shawl, smiling at the page. The world is still cold, but in this moment you aren't. It's just past midnight, and you're wide awake. Not by choice, of course, but because the wind has decided to stage a symphony in your chimney. You can hear it moaning like some lonely banshee, rattling the windows, tugging at the eaves, and making the floorboards hum with that low, miserable frequency that somehow manages to reach right into your bones. The fire is down to its last few embers. Your blanket has migrated to the floor, and for some reason your toes have turned into separate entities who no longer identify as part of your body. Welcome to the Edwardian winter night, where rest is a gamble and warmth is something you chase in dreams. Night, more than any other time, reveals just how poorly these houses are built to handle cold. You notice it most between the hours of 1 and 4 in the morning. That's when the temperature dips into something unspeakable, something beyond mere discomfort. It's like the walls begin to exhale frost. Every surface, bed knobs, doorknobs, your own nose, gathers a layer of icy condensation. And no amount of blankets, shawls, or tucked knees seems to stop the slow creeping chill that wraps around you like a wet rope. You turn over and attempt to create a new warm spot in the mattress, but the sheets are clammy and stiff. You regret not warming the bedpan before you climbed in, but the idea of getting back up now is laughable. You lie still, you listen. Somewhere in the distance a dog barks. A coal cart rumbles faintly over frozen cobbles. A gust of wind finds the exact frequency to whistle through the keyhole like it's sending coded messages from the underworld. And then comes the coughing. Not yours, at least not at first. It begins in the room next door. Your brother, then your mother, who tries to smother it with a pillow, then the baby, who coughs not so much as an illness, but as a lifestyle. Eventually you join in because it seems rude not to. The whole house is hacking like a tuberculosis ward in chorus. It's oddly comforting. Misery does love company, and nothing builds solidarity like a shared respiratory situation. In some households, this is the hour for the hot water bottle rotation. Whoever was selfish enough to hoard it first now passes it to the next person. It's lost most of its heat by now, but it's better than nothing. You clutch it like it's a small dying animal and tuck it against your chest, pretending it might spread just enough warmth to reach your toes. Here's an odd nighttime ritual from the era. Some Edwardians believed that sleeping with a knife under the bed would ward off illness and nightmares. Not to use as a weapon, just to have it there. The idea was that the iron would absorb bad energy, or perhaps slice through spiritual cold. You tried it once, did nothing for your dreams, but it was reassuring in the same way a teddy bear might be. Just sharper. Sleep, when it comes, arrives in fragments. A doze here, a half-dream there. You drift off imagining summer, long grass, bees, warmth on bare arms. But then your body reminds you of the present with a muscle cramp or an especially enthusiastic floorboard creak. You jolt awake, heart pounding, blanket tangled, unsure if that sound was the wind or something worse. Either way, you're too tired to care. If you're truly desperate, you sneak downstairs to the kitchen. You move like a ghost in layers of flannel, the stairs groaning in protest beneath every step. The kitchen is colder than your bedroom, but at least the fire's ashes still hold a whisper of heat. You crouch beside them, trying not to wake anyone, and tuck your hands close. It's not enough. You grab a leftover crust to chew quietly. Then you sit in the big chair and listen to the house breathe. Scholars write about Edwardian nights as if they were tranquil things. Families gathered around the fire, reciting poetry, reading Dickens aloud. And sure, that happens, but not at 300 am, not when the fire's gone out. The air smells like coal dust and damp stockings, and the wind keeps knocking something loose on the roof. These are the hours no one puts in the history books. The hours when survival isn't dramatic, just stubborn. If you're a servant, the night is shorter. You rise before dawn to lay the fire, draw the curtains, maybe start the porridge. Your fingers are stiff and red by the time the first ember catches. You keep your coat on longer than you're supposed to. No one sees, no one says anything. If you're lucky, you sip the last of yesterday's tea before anyone else stirs. It's cold, it's bitter, but it's yours. And if you live alone, well, then it's just you and the noises. A creak, a knock, a whistle. The ticking of the clock becomes a countdown to dawn. You pull the covers tighter. You whisper to yourself. Sometimes you sing quietly just to fill the silence. A lullaby you don't even remember learning. A hymn, a nursery rhyme. Anything that makes the dark feel a little less infinite. Eventually you hear the sounds of morning creeping in. Soft steps upstairs, a kettle being filled. A fire being coaxed back to life. The blackness outside fades to blue, then grey. You sit up slowly, limbs aching, mouth dry, skin cold and clammy. You didn't sleep much. You never do in winter. But you made it through the longest hours. And that's its own kind of triumph. You stretch, shuffle toward the kitchen and think, not for the first time, how strange it is that something as constant as night can feel so different in the cold. In summer, it's rest. In winter, it's survival in slow motion. And still you light the fire. You boil the water. You begin again. You're never truly alone in winter. Not in Edwardian England. Not when the weather itself becomes a kind of uninvited roommate. And like most terrible roommates, it complains, it leaks, it breaks things, and occasionally tries to kill you. Still, despite the daily chill, the icy breath on your neck, and the persistent threat of falling down frozen steps, there is one thing the season gives you in abundance: time. And what do people do when given time, stiff fingers, and absolutely nothing to distract them? They make things. Little things, big things, pointless things, beautiful things. Winter crafts become their own cottage industry, a kind of quiet rebellion against the unrelenting cold. It starts with knitting, of course. Everyone knits. Grandmothers, children, spinsters, bored housewives, even the odd gentleman who swears it helps his gout. You've got a basket of half-finished scarves beside the hearth, all of them slightly different lengths, none of them quite straight. Some are gifts, others are destined to be stuffed under a door to block drafts, and one is serving as a makeshift kettle cosy because you forgot to buy the proper one and now you're committed. Wool is gold in winter. Thick, scratchy, grease-smelling wool that makes your nose itch and your neck rashy, but keeps your fingers from turning blue. You learn to card it, spin it, dye it with onion skins or soot or weak tea. The colours are always a bit off, but you call them natural and pretend it's on purpose. Children get involved too, often because they're trapped indoors by the weather and driving their mothers insane. They make paper chains out of old catalogues. They carve little animals from soap or stick pins into dried apples to make doll heads that will haunt your dreams. Girls sew sachets from leftover fabric scraps, stuffed with lavender if you have it, or with whatever's dry and doesn't bite back when crushed. Boys make sleds from broken chairs, or glue wheels onto boxes and declare them racing carts. None of it's useful, all of it matters. And then there's mending. You sit near the fire, darning socks by candlelight, the threads rough and your fingers clumsy from the cold. You patch elbows, reinforce knees, re-stitch seams that burst open during yesterday's attempt to shovel snow in a too small coat. You've mended the same pair of gloves 4 times now. They look like Frankenstein's hands, but they're yours. Upstairs, your mother embroiders a pillowcase with trembling fingers. It's her winter ritual, a design she never finishes, blue thread on white linen, tiny flowers and vines creeping across the corner like frost on glass. She never rushes. The pillow is thin, the fabric older than you, but the embroidery is perfect. She says she does it to pass the time. You think she does it to remember that beauty can still exist in bleak months. For the ambitious, There are entire winter projects. Quilts assembled from old dresses and suits, cut into precise shapes and sewn together in patterns passed down through generations. Rag rugs woven from whatever's too thin to wear but too useful to throw away. Braided rope doorstops, button jars repurposed into decorative pincushions shaped like strawberries, mushrooms, or slightly melted bears. Here's your delightful oddity for the evening. In certain parts of Edwardian rural England, it was customary to craft snow dolls inside the house during long cold spells. Not made of snow, of course, but fabric and lace and dried corn husks, dressed like miniature villagers. Families would create entire tiny communities on the mantel or windowsill, moving the dolls around daily like a soap opera of cloth people. If one was left outside overnight and survived until morning without falling over, it was considered a sign that spring was near, or at least that the spirits were in a good mood. And sometimes these crafts cross the line into folklore. You carve a tiny wooden fox and leave it on the windowsill for protection. You fold a bit of tinfoil into the shape of a bell and hang it above the door to keep away frost devils. You knit a blue string and tie it around the bedpost to keep dreams from freezing. These aren't rules, they're habits. And habits, in winter, are a kind of magic. There's a whole subculture of scholarly discussion around these domestic crafts. Some historians argue they were born of necessity, ways to repair, reuse, make do. Others insist they served psychological needs, giving people a sense of control and creation when nature was shutting everything else down. Either way, when you've spent 8 straight weeks scraping ice off your kettle, a good embroidery hoop starts to look like salvation. It's also a form of storytelling. You keep scraps of cloth from your wedding dress, your brother's uniform, the dress your baby wore when she took her first steps. You stitch them into a quilt not because you need warmth, though you absolutely do, but because each square tells you that you've lived, that you've survived. The fabric becomes a map of your own resilience. Sometimes you craft in groups. You sit in someone's parlour, scarves on, feet tucked under chairs, mugs of hot water or weak cocoa in hand, and you all knit, sew, carve, mend together. The air smells like wool and candle smoke. The conversation drifts from gossip to recipes, to old stories of winters past, where the snow came higher and the soup was thinner, but the people were just as stubborn. You teach a neighbour how to make a sock monkey. She teaches you how to knit a thumb into a mitten without swearing. A boy carves a whistle from a stick and gives it to his sister, who immediately blows it loud enough to rattle the windows. You consider banishing him to the outdoors. He grins and blows it again. At night you pack everything away. The unfinished quilt, the lopsided scarf, the stack of paper chains, the small army of cloth mice stuffed with oats and mischief. You clear the table and bank the fire, and even though your fingers ache, your eyes burn and the room is still cold, you feel something like pride. Because in a season that strips everything down to survival, you made something. A scrap of colour, a shred of story. A thing that didn't exist yesterday, and now does, simply because you refuse to let winter take everything. Sometimes winter gives you a break. Not warmth exactly, but light. A day when the sun actually appears, climbing sluggishly over the horizon like a hungover cat, flooding the street with a brief golden glow that turns the frost into diamonds and the soot into something almost poetic. On these rare Edwardian days, when the sky isn't choked with coal smoke or sleet, everyone emerges like blinking moles from dark burrows. It's not quite spring, it's not even mild, but it looks warmer, and that's enough to fool the human brain into thinking, we should go outside. You put on every layer you own, dull cold, but hopeful. The street is somehow both frozen and muddy, like the earth can't decide what to do with itself. Icicles dangle from gutters like the teeth of sleepy monsters. Children poke them with sticks and chase each other with their frozen spears until someone cries or bleeds or both. The adults pretend not to notice. They're too busy tilting their faces toward the light, sun-starved and half-feral, like houseplants left in a cupboard too long. This is what passes for a winter outing. You walk through the park, boots crunching on gravel and ice, passing others who are also pretending this is leisure, and not an attempt to remind themselves they're still alive. The lake is half frozen, reflecting the sunlight like a cracked mirror. You spot a brave couple trying to skate, wobbling like drunks, laughing too loudly. The nearby goose glares at them with imperial disapproval. A vendor appears with roasted chestnuts, which are only slightly burnt and surprisingly warm. You buy a small paper cone and juggle them in your gloves, inhaling their smoky sweetness. For a few minutes you are incandescently, foolishly, irrationally happy. That's the trick of sun in winter. It doesn't fix anything, it just feels like it might. You pass by the market square where someone's strung up a line of paper flags, faded from old rain but fluttering proudly in the brittle breeze. A small brass band, 3 men and a boy who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, plays something vaguely cheerful. The notes are flat. The trumpet has a dent. A dog howls along, but people stop, they clap. A child drops a penny into the hat and misses by about a foot. It's perfect. Even the air feels different. Less like punishment, more like possibility. It smells like coal and cabbage, sure, but also like chimney smoke and the ghost of someone baking bread. You follow that scent without meaning to, all the way down the row of terraced houses to a bakery that's somehow both open and not entirely frozen. The woman behind the counter looks surprised to see so many people, her hair frizzed from heat and steam. You buy a stale bun and tell yourself it's rustic. You eat it anyway. There's a group of children building something in the park, a snow creature probably, though at this stage it's just a heap of slush with a top hat. They argue about whether it's a horse or a person or maybe a dragon. A little girl declares it's a frost monster who guards the gate of winter. You applaud her creativity and wonder if she's been reading the same illustrated penny dreadfuls you loved as a kid. Now here's a slightly obscure winter practice from the countryside. On sunny days after a storm, people would open every curtain in the house and let the sunlight hit the walls, even if it meant a drop in temperature. The belief was that sunlight killed illness, chased off the fever as some put it. In truth, it probably just made the rooms feel less like coffins. But even now, on days like this, you instinctively push back the curtain, let the sunlight wash over the faded wallpaper, and pretend your whole house isn't held together by prayer and mould. There's scholarly debate over how much winter sunlight actually affected mental health in Edwardian society. Some records suggest spikes in optimism during brief warm spells. Others note that suicide rates stayed constant no matter the weather. But anecdotal evidence, the kind you hear whispered in kitchens and over fences, tells you everything. People laughed more on sunny days. They sang more. They opened windows and made plans and let their children stomp puddles without scolding them. You return home, cheeks red, boots soggy, arms full of nothing useful and everything necessary. A new skein of yarn, a half-melted candle, an orange so old it's probably a war crime. You unload your treasures on the kitchen table, shed your coat and bask in the way the sunlight makes even your worn floorboards look like part of a watercolour painting. By late afternoon, the warmth is already fading. The sun dips behind the buildings, dragging the temperature down with it. You feel it immediately in your shoulders, that invisible hand pulling the chill back in. You close the curtains, you relight the fire, but the mood lingers. It follows you into evening, lighting little sparks in your tired limbs. You find yourself humming while you stir the pot. You smile when the cat hops into your lap. You read a chapter more than you planned. Because even though the cold will return, more snow, more wind, more chapped lips and shivering spoons, you had this day, and that changes things. Maybe tomorrow will be back to grey skies and frozen laundry. Maybe the next 10 days will be sleet and slush and your neighbour's endless complaints about his chilblains. But maybe, just maybe, there'll be another day like this. So you fold your blanket, bank the fire and press your hand briefly to the window pane. Still cold but not cruel, not tonight. And then, quietly, without fanfare or trumpet, it begins to end. Winter doesn't vanish in Edwardian England. Not all at once. It retreats like a sullen guest overstaying its welcome, shuffling off in bits and pieces, leaving muddy footprints behind. You don't notice it immediately. One morning is just as cold as the last. Your breath still hangs heavy in the kitchen, and the ice on the bucket still needs breaking. But somewhere, deep in the marrow of the season, something changes. A softness in the light. A certain give in the earth. A sound that doesn't belong to winter. Birdsong. At first it's a single chirp so faint you think you imagined it, but then it comes again. Persistent, hopeful, almost defiant. And suddenly the streets seem less like frozen corridors and more like something in the process of waking up. The snow still clings to the rooftops, but the edges melt faster now, dripping down drain pipes with rhythmic plinks that feel suspiciously like music. Inside, you're still layering your clothes like a nervous onion. You still dread the walk to the privy, but the fire catches easier. The damp wood that used to sulk in the hearth now bursts into flame with the first match. You can feel your fingers more often than not. Your tea stays hot longer, and when you open the back door you catch the faintest whiff of earth. Not the clean, sharp scent of snow, but something deeper, older. Soil waking up. Your neighbours notice it too. The old woman next door, who hasn't left her stoop since Boxing Day, comes out with a shawl and a broom and starts swatting at the lingering frost like it's personal. The butcher's boy whistles again on his rounds. The milkman smiles more, though his hands are still red from the cold. These aren't miracles, they're recalibrations. You're all learning how to feel warm again, one cautious breath at a time. You step outside one morning and realise you don't need your heaviest scarf, that your boots don't crunch on ice but squelch in mud, that your face no longer hurts the second you expose it. These are small mercies, but they add up. The windows don't frost overnight. The fire burns a little lower. You start to eat fewer root vegetables and dream absurdly of strawberries. Now comes the great unsealing. Doors and windows, closed tight for months, are pried open to let out the damp and the ghosts of stews past. People air out blankets. They beat rugs over fences, coughing in clouds of dust and lint and forgotten breadcrumbs. Children chase each other with their brooms. Someone finds a long-lost slipper beneath the sofa and holds it aloft like a treasure. There's a moment, a precise one, when the laundry dries outside for the first time since November. You peg out socks on the line, and the wind doesn't bite your hands. It kisses them, gently, like it's remembering how to be kind, and the socks flutter, stiff at first, but then loosening into movement. Flags of survival. You plant things, not because it's safe yet, but because you must. Even if it's just seeds in a cracked pot, perched on the windowsill like a prayer. You whisper encouragement. You press your fingers into the dirt and feel its cold, stubborn promise. Not yet, but soon. There's a lovely bit of Edwardian superstition here. Some families would bury a lump of ice in the garden to trick winter into thinking it had already claimed its due. It's nonsense, of course, but like most seasonal traditions, it gave people something to do, a ceremony to end the long chill. You try it with a bit of frozen water from your kitchen basin, planting it like a bulb and waiting for the world to notice. The scholars argue about when winter really ends. The equinox, the first snowdrop, the first lamb born in the fields. But for you, it ends with puddles. Honest-to-goodness, splashable, squelchable puddles. Messy, inconvenient, glorious. The ice is gone, the ground yields. You track mud into the house and don't even feel guilty. You made it. The season has turned. That night, the fire is smaller. On purpose. You sit closer to the window, listening to the quiet drip of thaw outside. You open the pane just a crack, not because the room needs air, but because you do. It smells of wet brick and newness. Not sweet, not yet, but clean, like the end of something difficult and the beginning of something unknown. You still wear layers, you still tuck a hot brick into your bed, but you leave the curtains open an inch now so you can see the stars. You put out a small bowl of breadcrumbs for the birds. You stretch your arms without shivering, you smile without thinking, you sleep better. Tomorrow might still be cold, it probably will be, but not the same cold, not the punishing, spirit-draining kind. This cold has edges, limits. It's running out of time and it knows it. You sit with your tea and your tired bones, and you realise something important. You didn't just survive winter, you outlasted it. With your patched gloves, your weird remedies, your soggy boots, your drafty walls, and your perfectly unhinged superstitions. You pushed back against months of darkness and cold and said, "Not today." And today the sun is up, the frost is melting, and you are still here. So now you're tucked in, safe beneath your blankets, and the worst of it is behind you. You've trudged through Edwardian snowbanks in shoes with holes, endured mustard plasters on your chest, dodged soot clumps falling from chimneys, and rationed coal like it was dragon treasure. And somehow, despite all that, you made it to spring. Not just because the calendar said so, but because you did the work. You layered, you boiled, you mended, you waited, you made it through. What stands out most, now that the chill is finally lifting, isn't just the cold, it's what people did in spite of it. How they turned scraps into comfort. How laughter slipped in through the cracks along with the wind. How love and soup and shared silence around a fire became currency that couldn't be taxed or burned or rationed. You saw families huddled together in one warm room, not because they had to, but because that's where the stories were told, the knitting was done, the letters were read aloud, the futures were quietly imagined. You watched a world stretch the definition of warmth to mean more than fire. It meant kindness, effort, remembering to warm someone else's slippers near the hearth, or giving away your last biscuit because someone else looked colder than you felt. It meant hanging blue beads above the door, just in case, and turning stale tea into a cure-all through sheer force of will. It meant laughing when the pipes froze, and again when they thawed, and somehow still finding the energy to sweep out the ashes and start over. Now the house is warmer. The frost is gone from the window panes, there's mud on the floor, and the sun lasts a little longer each day. Maybe tomorrow the washing will dry outside. Maybe next week you'll leave your coat open for the first time in months. The hard part's over, and spring, like a shy guest, is finally knocking. Rest well tonight, knowing that in the end, it wasn't just heavy coats and coal fires that got the Edwardians through those brutal winters. It was stubbornness, humour, love, and a spectacularly creative understanding of what counts as insulation.